Okay, guys, we're going to get started. I'm going to go over just a couple of the assignments that were turned in really quickly. Then we're going to do a very abbreviated version of that in class, just to make sure that everybody's comfortable with working with frequency separation. And then today we actually start compositing. So we dive into that in a kind of a big way today. So that's kind of where things are going to start. Okay, so again, in no particular order, if I call you out, I'm not calling you out, I'm just pointing out certain things that happen that were pretty common to everyone. Those are also things that we will go over later in class. So I want to start with Mize really quickly, and just to give you this is a way to think about how you're doing your retouching, your frequency separation stuff, where it falls in the line of your layer stack, all that kind of stuff. So just to give you a quick idea, that's the reason I'm looking at this image right here. So things start out pretty good. There is we start out with the new virgin layer here. It gets a little bit wonky, and I'm not sure what's causing this white in the, because I've got everything else, I think, turned off. Yeah, I've got everything else turned off. If I take a look at the layer mask by itself, I keep encouraging you to do that. Look at your layer masks by themselves. So I'm going to hold down the Option key and click on that, and you can see this is where all of that contamination is. So all of those white specks that are showing up in here exist right in here, and if this becomes the new virgin, that's where we're in trouble right off the bat. So the quick and easy fix for this, again, I'm going to hold down my Option key and simply look at this. I'm going to hit the B key to get a brush, make it a little bit larger. I'm going to change the blending mode to overlay just so that I can protect the edges. I'm going to stay away from the edges, but here at the very top of the hair, there's nothing that I need to really worry about. It's this part I want to clean up. So I'm not going to do an overlay brush. I'm going to do a normal brush, but I'm going to make it a completely hard brush so that I don't do any overspray. And then white is my foreground color. I'm just going to clean this up. Again, I'm going to stay away from these edges over here. Those actually belong. And this part right in here does not. Neither does that. And then I'm going to turn on my layer mask just to see where I'm at. And you can see all of that white part's gone. And then start the work from there. So, and then the next thing I wanted to point out is where you actually, so then there's spill removal done, a new virgin created, and then again, the split frequency layers were created. But Mai actually puts in her hair fix in the FS group, which you can do. The problem that you run into though is, is it low blur? Is it high blur? And I mean, is it the low frequency group? Is it the high frequency group? For my money, I wouldn't do any of that work there. If you didn't do the retouching in the beginning, and that's probably where I would have done it, I would have fixed the hair before I created this new virgin and then split everything. It just would have been easier to do. However, there's times where that doesn't happen. There's times where you realize after the fact you've done all your split frequency work, you've done all of this stuff, whatever, and you've done tonal work, all this stuff, and then you realize, oh Jesus, I haven't fixed the hair. You can go ahead and do the hair on the very top. You could create a brand new virgin on the top, or for that matter, just new hair on the very top, and it would sit on top of your frequency separation work. There's no reason that it has to be a part of that. So anyway, I just wanted to point that part out. And then I'm not going to dwell on a lot of the FS work that was done because we are going to actually do that here in class. I do want to, though, show you a couple of ways people did fix stuff, the teeth especially. So there were better versions of the teeth fixed than others. This one really quickly, just to show you, this is Dawn's. And it's not that this is entirely wrong. Actually, there was a lot. You can just leave it right there because there'll be still people coming in. It's not entirely wrong. It's just it needs to match. It's too bright. It's too bright, and the shape of it is probably off a little bit as well. So if we take a look at the mouth fix that's in here, this is where it is right here. And you can see that if I turn off everybody else and then turn off this, that was the mouth that was actually put in. And that part's actually, that's not that part actually works pretty well. The problem that I have with this, though, again, is it's too bright. So I'm going to turn this part off. And then there's a set of hair fixes that are above this. So the first thing that I notice when I'm looking at this is that you can see this area right in here. The mouth doesn't actually fit. The old mouth, the mouth that is behind it, doesn't really necessarily fit in here completely. So if I turn, see this really dark line that's right up here where it's the top lip is touching the teeth. If I hold down the shift key and get rid of that part, you can see that I don't actually have any idea what is really making that part right there. But at any rate, I'm going to break the link between these two, and I'm simply going to transform the mouth. So with the mouth selected, not the mask, again, I broke the link, so the mask stays in place. It does not change, but I am going to change the pixel content. So this is the pixel content that I've selected. So my brackets are around this. Command T to bring up the transform dialog box. I'm going to zip back out a little bit so you can see the whole thing. You want to warp at this point. You don't want to actually just make the teeth bigger or smaller. You simply want to bend them. That's what you're really trying to do. So I'm going to click on the warp tool, and you'll see I get the control handles. And now if I grab this part and pull it up, yeah, the reason this is dark here is it's the layer mask. The layer mask isn't complete here. But nonetheless, I'm going to reshape the mouth a little bit, and you can see I'm seeing more of the lower lip now. So, this is actually not where the problem is. The problem is going to be with the layer mask part. So at any rate, I'm going to show you some examples where this work was actually done correctly. I'm not going to spend my time working on this one because we got too much else to do today. So I'm going to close that up. I'm not going to save that. I am going to show you Emily's, where this actually does come up. And in this one, again, I thought this was actually really well done. It's the same teeth, and it's set in the mouth the same way. So again, if I hold down my shift key and turn off the layer mask, you can see it's a darker edge. Actually, it's a different mouth, so it's not the same one. But the problem that I thought was happening in the other one is actually happening in this one. So again, I'm going to break the chain link between the two. Select the mouth, the teeth, Command T to bring up the transform dialog box, hit the warp tool, and then I'm simply going to pull the edges of this up, and then the other side up as well. So it cleans up that line that's actually right above. Now in this case, Emily actually was smart that she actually realized that the teeth were too light. So this is actually knocking them down, and it's doing a really good job. I think that part works. What's missing in this, though, is that the upper lip would be creating a shadow on the top of her teeth. If you turn all of this off and go back and look at the original teeth, you can see the shadow is right here. This one back tooth is deeply in shadow. That's what actually makes the teeth crossed, is this lighting mismatch. But you can also see that there's a shadow on the top that's being caused by that upper lip. We need to create that again in this image here so that it looks like the teeth are set deeper in her mouth. If there is no shadow, it pulls the teeth forward so that the teeth actually are flush with the front of her upper lip, which would never be. The ones that are on the side actually are doing pretty good. That's actually set back into her mouth. But anyway, to finish this, I'm simply going to add another curve. You can see there is a curve that's already been clipped to the mouth, so this curve is only controlling the teeth. I'm going to add another curve on top of that. I'm going to clip it as well. And then I'm just going to pull the top down, and you can see, you can make it really pretty dark. I am going to make it really pretty dark just so that I can see it. Once I paint in on the mask where I want it to be, then I can fine tune it. So I'm going to invert my mask, Command I, so you can't see any of it. I'm going to hit the B key to get a brush. I'm going to make it an incredibly soft brush. Normal blending mode, 100% opacity. I'm going to drop the flow down to around a 10% on this. I want to scrub this in slowly. I don't want to try and do this all in just one hit across. And then white is my foreground color, and I'm simply going to start to work on this to pull this part back down in. And that's about all it really needs. If you take a look now at the difference, you can see those teeth look now set into her mouth, and it's just a subtle thing like that. Otherwise, I thought this was really incredibly well done. I mean, it was really well done. And the last one I'm going to show you really quickly, just because I've got a question about it. Is Dasha's, and this one I really felt like in many ways was the superstar of the crowd, because if you take a look at it, the teeth in here look incredibly real. There's still this one missing tooth over here. It was the only thing that I could knock about this whole image. But if you take a look at the retouching that's actually been done on this, the skin still looks like skin. It's been smoothed out. It's beautifully well. I mean, just here, this is the before and the after. And this is what I keep talking to you guys about. I kept sending out message after message in the comments about what the purpose of working on that low layer is, to actually smooth the blotchiness of the skin out. Just take a look at this area right here. You can see what's going on, and this is going to be, again, the befores and the afters. And you can see there's like a light line that's running right through here. There's a dark edge right here, and all that she's done is smooth that part out so that the transitions are just a little bit softer. That's all it is really meant to be. It's not meant to completely open up these shadows right here or completely shut down the highlights right here. Those shadows and highlights matter. It's really more about smoothing out the blotchiness of the skin. That's what's really going on here. But at any rate, I thought this was really well done, really well done. So we are going to do this in class really quickly. We're not going to spend a ton of time. I just want to go through a couple of again, solutions to make sure that everybody understands how this works. Again, all in all, collectively, the class did a relatively good job on this part. So I just want to touch bases on that really quickly, and then we will move on. So if you can find a copy of this, we're going to start with a virgin copy of it. So, and we're not going to bother, we did the knockout 2 weeks ago. I'm not going to bother to do any of that part. I'm just going to start doing the frequency separation work on the face. So it will be in week number 6, I think, in your assignment folder. And nope, that would be wrong. It'll be in week number 7 in your assignment folder, and that's where it is. So again, you have 2 copies in here. You've got the notes, and then you've just got this regular copy. If you don't, or if you did work on this regular copy and you don't have it anymore, whatever, just take the image that you turned in. We'll just do a duplicate of it and just get back to where you've only got the original, the initial background layer that's got the unretouched figure in it. This isn't going to be for your homework, so okay, I'm going to blow through this pretty quickly. You guys have the recipes for this. You've got them written down. I can promise you that once you spend enough time doing this, you'll just remember this. It just, you don't have to refer to the recipe. But for the first, I got to say, for the first year, I probably doing this work, I referred to the recipe all the time. So our first move is to make 2 copies of the background layer. Does everybody have this thing open? Anybody not? Okay, Command J makes 2 copies of it. Double click on the middle layer and name it low. Double click on the top layer and call it high. Again, if you're using other labels like high, texture detail, that's fine. If you're doing low, tone and color, that's also fine, just to help you remember what it is we're really going for. Turn the eyeball off for your high layer so that we can't see it. Select the low layer so that we are doing the work on the low layer. And then I'm going to zoom in to about 200%. That's where I am. And I'm looking really around her eye. It's just the easiest place to see where both high and low texture should actually be. So then I'm going to come up to the filter menu, and I'm going to come down to blur, down to Gaussian blur, and I'm going to drag across the radius to select it, and I'm going to type in a 1. And I can still see a lot of detail in this, so that is not enough. I'm going to hit my delete key and then hit a 2. It's just a faster way to go to do jumps of increments of 1 at a time. You can use the little slider down at the bottom and pull that over across if you want to. I just stay in full radiuses. It's faster for me to get where I think I'm trying to go. 2 is not enough. I'm going to hit the delete key and put in a 3. 3 is like getting close. I still feel like I've got enough in here. I've got like the blemish right here that's still got a lot in it. So I'm going to hit delete and hit 4. And not enough really changed in that. I'm going to take a look around this just to see. Have I lost the little hairs on there? I think I have. I feel like I have on their part. So yeah, I'm going to go ahead and go with a 4 on mine. So I'm going to hit OK to that. I'm going to I'm going to select my high layer, make it active, and turn on its eyeball. And then I'm going to come up to the image menu. I'll take my time on this one. So up to the image menu, again, make sure you've got your high layer selected and it's turned on. Up to the image menu, down to apply image, and let go. It will open up. In the very top, in the layer drop down, you do not want to use merged. You want to select the low layer, because what I'm doing is I am subtracting the low layer, just the blurred stuff that had no texture in it, no detail in it. It's just tone and color. I'm subtracting that from a version of the image that has both. It had everything. It's got the high and the low both. But once I subtract the low, the only thing that will remain is the high. That's where this whole split thing happens. So make sure that low layer is selected. In the blending mode, you want to use your drop-down menu and come down to subtract. Then you want to keep your opacity at 100%, a scale of 2, and an offset of 128. And your image should look like a high-pass filter image. It should be gray with, all you really should be seeing here is detail. You shouldn't really be seeing, obviously we have a gray tone in this, but we're not looking at variation of tone. As we move around in here, you'll see that it's just primarily detail in here. And I'm going to go ahead and say okay to that. Then I'm going to change the blending mode of that top layer from normal down to linear light. I'm going to hold down my shift key and select the low layer now so that I've got both the high and the low, both are selected. You can see they're both highlighted. I'm going to go to my dropout menu on the right side of the layers palette, click on it and say I want to do a new group from those layers. It's going to offer you the opportunity to name them. I always use FS for frequency separation. It's just a shortcut. And say okay to that. And then finally, I'm going to open both of these up. I'm going to, first off, I'm going to use the eyeball. I'm going to close it back up again. I'm going to use the eyeball on and off. And if you see any shift at all happen, you know something went wrong and you have to go back and do it all over again. In our case, I don't see any shift at all, so everything is fine in here. I am going to open this up again. I need to make copies of these so that if something goes wrong or I want to continue to edit this down the line and I need to undo something 6 months from now that I did thinking, oh, that was great, and it really wasn't, I make copies of my frequency separation layers to work on. So it's essentially the same sort of idea of having virgin copies of the low layer and a virgin copy of the high layer, so that if something goes wrong, I can simply go back down to the virgin copy and use that as a source to replace the work that I have done that is incorrect. So I'm going to click on the low layer inside my FS group and simply hit Command J. It does a great job. It actually names it for me, low copy, which is exactly how I'm going to leave it, because that way I know I'm only working on the low copy and I'm only going to work on the high copy as well. Select the high layer and do the same thing, Command J. But you'll notice when you do that, that this image gets very contrasty, very crunchy, very over sharpened. That's what it looks like. And the reason that's happening is that because I'm now applying 2 linear light layers to this. I don't want to do that. So to fix that, I'm going to then first clip this image. So I'm going to hover between the high and the high copy with my mouse, with my cursor, hold down the Option key, and my cursor will then change to a little square with an arrow pointing counterclockwise. I'm going to click, and you will see that that means it's actually being clipped. Now in this case, it didn't really change. It's still really crunchy. What I'm going to do is then change the blending mode of high copy from linear light back to normal. So the reason I go through all of this is that this allows me, what happens is when you clip a layer, it inherits the blending mode of the layer that's underneath it. So even though this thing is set to normal, it's inheriting the linear light underneath it. And so, so it is, my image does not look any different. Again, if you turn off your eyeball for the entire group, FS on and off, you don't see any change at all, and we are ready to go to work on this image. So the first thing I'm going to do is go to a tablet. If you've got your tablet, now would be a great time to whip it out. I'll give you a second to do that. Okay, so to begin with, I'm going to hit the S key to get through the clone stamp tool, and I want to set up my tools for a very specific way to actually do this work. So again, I hit the S key to get the clone stamp tool, or simply come over to your tool palette. It's almost right in the very middle. It looks like a stamp. Pick the clone stamp tool. Then up to the options bar, I'm going to click in the drop down menu, and in the clone stamp tool, when you're doing this work, because it is detail specific, I want a relatively hard brush. I don't want my edges of my brush to start mixing a lot of texture. I want to keep that texture intact. So I use an 85% brush percentage hardness on this. It's not completely hard. If I took it up to 100%, you would actually see the lines where you're actually replacing texture. I don't want to do that. I want to soften it a little bit, but not a heck of a lot. So 85% is going to work for me. I'm going to leave this as a normal blending mode, 100% opacity, 100% flow, and then I am going to keep this aligned. That just means that wherever I sample a source point and then hit a destination point, that relationship will remain intact until I set a new source point. And then finally in the drop-down menu, I want to only work on current layer. If you end up doing current and below, you'll see really bad stuff happen to your image. So that's how you set up for work on the high layer. I primarily only use the clone stamp tool on the high layer. I want an exact a replication of the pixels that I pick at my source point to my destination point. I don't want any post-process beyond that, which is what happens with the healing brush tools. And the healing brush tools, they're really designed to replace texture, but then they're also a secondary thing. They're designed to actually then look at the surrounding area of tone and color and try to match the new texture with that surrounding area. That's a perfect thing to work on in the low layer, not in the high layer. So I'm going to also set it up. I'm going to come over to the healing brush tool group. I typically use the healing brush, not the spot healing brush. The spot healing brush has Photoshop decide what your source point is. I don't want to do that. I actually want to use the healing brush tool where I pick the source point. It functions more like the clone stamp tool in that I get to pick the source. So I'm going to set that up. Again, I'm going to go up to the very top. In the healing brush tool, I want it to be relatively soft. I don't want it to be completely soft, but relatively soft. So I'm going to set mine at 50%. If I feel like I'm starting to see something, then I will change that. But right now, I feel pretty good about that part. I'm also going to keep this as a normal blending mode. In terms of the source, it always stays at sampled. We don't do pattern work here. We can use aligned here. It will actually function the same way. It'll keep the relationship between the source point and the destination point. That's fine. But also you want to use current layer only on this. I do not use the use legacy sample issue part on this. This goes back a long way in Photoshop. They made a change around Photoshop 5 that caused the entire Photoshop community to revolt, and they added this. Pretty much everybody's gotten away from it now and is sort of more used to working at it. This whole diffusion thing has added, has made this use legacy thing pretty much pointless. So at any rate, those things are set up. I've got one last thing to set up, and that is the mixer brush. So if you hit the B key to get your normal brush, I'm also going to set up my normal brush. I'm going to click and do the brush tool. I'm going to use my flyout menu. I'm going to make it a completely soft brush because I only use this thing on the low layer, and I want to blend all of those colors into one another. So I'm going to leave that there. And then finally, the mixer brush. So still in that same brush menu down at the bottom, the mixer brush. In the mixer brush, if you open this up, I have this as a completely soft brush. I really want to use it to blend in edges. So completely soft brush. In the, as you start to move to the right along the options bar at the very top, there's a preview box. It's the biggest box that's actually in the in the options part. You leave that alone. This is only for what the settings that we use are going to change what this thing looks like. So you don't actually work on it at all. You work on the things that are right to the right of it. So the one that's immediately to the right, this is supposed to look like push buttons. And if the button is dark, like if you look at my second one, that is indicating that the button has been pushed. If the surround is light, it is indicating that the button has not been pushed. You want to make sure that the first one to the right of that sample color is not pushed in. So it's got the light surround around it, or the one that matches the rest of the interface. And then the one that's next to that, you want to make sure that it is pressed in. And so it sort of looks like a black, a black key around it. You want to make sure that that is dark like that. Then continuing our way over in this drop-down menu, it'll stay at custom because that's what we're setting up. In terms of your wetness, you want to set that at 20%, the load at 100%, the mix at 100%, and then the flow will go anywhere from 20 to 40%. That's usually where I work. However, there are cases, so this is just how the strength of how this brush works. There are cases where you need to push this harder because you just get impatient. So you can crank this up. You can crank the flow up. This is the only thing that you'll actually change. Everybody else stays the same. Flow is the only thing that changes in here. And it's just a question of how aggressive your brush is. If things are happening too fast and you're not getting the blend or the control that you want, lower your flow. If things are happening so slow you feel like you can get up and take a nap, then crank your flow up higher. But again, the typical range runs around 20 to 40, 20 to 50, somewhere in there. That's the range you're actually going to be working in. Okay, so for me, the first thing I'm going to do is start down on her chin, because this is where a lot of people miss things. So I'm going to hold down my space bar to get the hand temporarily. I'm going to come down to her chin, and it's this area that's right in here. I am going to start with the high layer, so I'm going to select my high layer because I'm going to try to get rid of most of this blemish, although part of this blemish is not detail or texture. Part of this is tone, so we're going to have to hit this on both layers. I am going to hit my S key to get to my clone stamp tool because that's the tool that I use on my high layer. I'm going to make it a little bit larger so that it looks about the size of this area. But I am also going to turn everybody else off. I work on my layers by themselves, and the reason I do that is it's easier to see where you want to take texture from and where you need to put it. So to do that, you hover over the eyeball of your high copy, you hold down the Option key, and you click. it will turn everybody else off, and then you can really see what's going on in here. And you can see that what I really thought was the problem in the very center, it turns out the pimple that's in the center, here I'll show you the one I'm talking about. I'm going to hold down my Option key and click on that same eyeball again, and it'll turn everybody else back on. This thing that's right in here is primarily low layer. It's primarily inflamed red. It's not really that it's a raised pimple. It isn't. And I know that, again, I'm going to hold down my Option key and click on the eyeball because I don't see anything here. So I do see a lot of pores here that I do want to fix. So the area that's right underneath it, you can see the pores start to diminish as you work your way down. And when I get down here, I've got just little fine hairs. This is where I'm going to set my sample point. So I'm hovering over this area. I'm going to hold down my Option key and click. That sets that as the source point. And then I'm going to come up and I'm simply going to start to work my way through all of those pores that are on the top to sort of fix them so that that part is, isn't the same. Now, I actually came up and hit the pores again, so I'm now cloning up too high. So I'm going to hit Command Z to undo that and start it again. So I will come down here at the beginning and start and go through this. I'm going to stop at that point, come back down again and reset another sample point, but I'm not going to go right underneath where I actually originally started. I'm going to move a little bit to the right or a little bit to the left because I don't want to create repeating patterns in this. So I'm going to hold down my Option key and set a new source point and then come up and cut through a little bit more. And then finally, I'm going to go down again on the lower over to the more the left side and sample over there to finish this out. So I'm mixing my texture up from down underneath. If you hold down your Option key and click on the eyeball, it'll turn everybody else back on, and you can see that I've actually removed the pores that are in there. Now, I've still got a lot of lumpiness in here, and the lumpiness in here is not my detail or texture. It's all in my lower layer. So I'm going to come down to my low copy. I'm going to hold down my Option key again and click on this just so that I can see only the low copy, and you can see all of the problems that I've actually got in here. So I'm going to start working pretty fast on this to fix these guys up. I'm going to start with the clone stamp tool. With a healing brush tool. If you hit the J key, it is the healing brush tool. You need to make sure that you've selected your low copy. I still had my high copy was selected even though the eyeball was turned off. So I'm on my low copy. I'm going to come over to the healing brush group and make sure it is selected to healing brush. And I'm going to make my healing brush a little bit larger. I'm going to hold down my Option key to set a new source point, and I'm just going to run through these parts to try to smooth these areas out. The blotchiness that I'm seeing in here, I'm just going to try to work through these really pretty quickly. You can do this while you're watching this in real time. Hold down your Option key and click on it so you can actually see the area that's in here. If you turn just the eyeball off, you can see that this is actually what we've started to do here. This all being said, though, this is still really blotchy skin. You can see there's a white part up in here. There's a little white part here. All of these are white. I haven't really fixed this as well as I would like to. So again, I'm going to go back, hold down my Option key, and click on the low layer so that I can see it. I'm going to fix another couple of small spots that are right down here. All of that seems pretty good to me. And then I'm going to smooth the whole area out. I'm going to go to my mixer brush to do that. So go over to your brush menu. You could hit the B key, and it'll pick whatever the last brush you used was. So you need to keep that in mind. If you are working with the mixer brush and all of a sudden you want to go to the regular brush, you've got to come back over to the tool palette to actually do it. So I'm going to grab the mixer brush and I'm going to come over here, make my brush a little bit smaller. And so what I'm trying to do, I can see an area right up here in the very top that's got very obvious lighter area. It just looks really bad. So anyway, I'm going to come over here and I'm just going to start clicking and dragging across. And I'm going to come back on the other side and I'm going to start to smooth these down. I'm pulling my highlights down more into my shadows. And this is a pretty fast brush. I'm going to actually drop my flow down to 20 because it's happening awfully quickly. And then this whole edge of shadow right here, I don't want to eliminate it. I simply want to soften the edge up. So I'm just going to come across this really quickly like that to lighten it up. I've got a really dark spot that's right underneath her, her lip that I can mixer brush across. And that is horrible. Look at what just happened. It just ruined all of that. So I'm going to go back in history to undo that. That just made an absolute mess. It actually picked up so much of that dark part. Yeah, so I'm back right now. So I cannot use the mixer brush to actually do this part here. Instead, I'm going to fix it using a regular brush. So up to your brush menu again and grab a regular brush. Make my brush a little bit smaller. And then I want to sample a color that will actually allow me to lighten this whole area. So if you look down on her skin, there's some really serious highlights down here. I think that's a little bit too light. So I'm going to sample the color that's right over here on the little bit left side. I'm going to hold down my Option key, click, that samples that color. Again, my flow needs to be lower than this. I'm going to drag my flow down to like a 2%. And then I'm just going to start scrubbing in this area right in here. And in this area right in here to just lighten this whole part up. And I don't like this, it just became too light. I'm at a flow of 2% and it's just too fast to me. So Command Z to undo that part. I'm going to resample again, holding down my Option key, a little bit darker to just get that in a little bit, a little darker. I'm going to go back to my mixer brush really quickly. And this area that's dark down here in the bottom, I'm going to drop my flow down even more, bring it down to 10%. And I'm just going to try and soften this little edge that's coming up and then coming in. And then also coming up a little bit right here. And I'm feeling better about that part. I still have got that little white dot that's right in the middle, so I'm going to go back to my healing brush tool. I'm going to just sample an area over here. Again, you're not picking up color from this, you're picking up tone, and that just got rid of that guy. And then again, I'm going to come over to my low layer, hold down my Option key, and click on this to see what this ultimately looks like. And things are actually looking pretty good in here. It's still a little bit wonky over on this side, but I'm feeling a little better than that. I've got a highlight right here I need to fix. But to see what we've really done, I'm going to zip out and then come in a little bit. Scroll down to your background layer, hold on your Option key, and click on that eyeball. It turns everybody else off. And you can see this is how I would begin doing it. But if you come in close on this, you can see it's still got real texture. There's still pores in the skin, all of that. And I haven't lost any of that part. So that part's actually working well for me. Are there questions about any of this? Is this working for you guys? Yep. Okay, I'm going to zoom back out and do just a more quick overview of where I would smooth things out. So I'm going to go back to my low copy. I'm going to leave everybody else on so that you guys can actually see this. I do most of this work using the mixer brush, so that's what I'm going to pick. I'm going to make it a much larger one. And there's this area that I was talking about right underneath her eye. It's just this white area that's cutting through. So I'm just going to start at the bottom and work my way up just to soften that edge a little bit. I don't like how dark it is under her eye. I can try to pull from the lighter area that's over on this side, but I think a brush is a better way to do it, a regular brush. So I'm going to click and change this to a regular brush, also a bigger brush, not that big. I'm going to sample a color of this lightest skin that's right over here. And then again, with a flow that's around 2%, that may be still too much, but we'll try. I'm just going to start to scrub in this area right in here, just to loosen that up. That got that pretty well done. Again, I would resample again. The line where the blush is actually hitting her up here is still too strong. So I'm going to go back to my mixer brush. And I'm going to start to pull down just a little bit into here, just to soften that line up. And so again, if you want to see the difference that we've just made, hold down your Option key, click on the original background or your new version if we'd made one, and turn this on and off. And you can see what I've done here. I haven't removed this highlight and I haven't removed this shadow. That's not what this whole thing is about. It's smoothing out the skin, the transitions of blotchiness from one place to another. That's what this whole thing is about. It's not opening up all the shadows and shutting down all the highlights. We're going to go after one last thing, and it's going to be the 2 pimples that are up right in her forehead. So I'm going to start on my high layer because that's where it most likely, or at least most of it is. So I'm going up to my high copy, hitting the S key to get the clone stamp tool. And again, right now you have to ask yourself, well, where do I sample from? Because you're seeing all the color, it's really hard to pick. All I want to do is replace the detail. I don't want to replace color yet. So again, I am going to hold down my Option key and click on the eyeball so I can just see. And when I look at this, I see there's a lot of solid texture that's right in here across the sort of the bridge of her nose. That's where I'm going to take this from. As you start to move down into her eye or up into her forehead, the focus of this is going to change. I don't want that to happen. So I'm going to hold down my Option key to click a source point, and I'm coming over and just taking care of that one pimple that's on that side, and I'm going to do the same thing on the one that's on the other side. And then I'm going to hold down the Option key and click on this layer again to turn everybody else back on. So that got rid of the texture, but it did not get rid of the tone and color. It's still really red, and it's still dark in this other part. So I'm going to scroll down to my low layer, my low copy, hold down my Option key and turn it off so I can really see where do I want to pick from to make this actually blend in with the area that's around it. I'm going to be lazy and just do it with the clone stamp tool. So up to the healing brush set, the clone stamp tool. I'm going to make it a little bit smaller. Hold down the, doesn't really matter where we're selecting from in here. We're not replacing texture. And the tool itself will pick the color and the tone that surrounds where we hit with this brush. So I could pick something up here in the very top. I'm just going to go hold down my Option key, click up above this, and then just hit across that, and it blends it in completely. I've got another one that's right here in the middle, and then I got the last one that's up here in the very top. And now if I hold down my Option key and click on to see everybody else, you can see that that is completely gone. If you scroll down to the very bottom, hold down your Option key and click on the eyeball, you can see that's what we ultimately did. But I've got nothing but texture in there, and the tone and the color blend perfectly around that. And then you just keep going. Questions? Okay, you can close that up. You don't need to save that. I need to look to see where we're at today. So give me 1 second. Okie dokie. So we are going to get into compositing today. So the first thing that we need to talk about really quickly is that when you are compositing, and when I talk about compositing here, I realize that there are fantastical composites. There's composites that are designed to never look real, and that's not what we're talking about here. Doing the ones that actually don't, that are simply fantastical and don't have any reason to feel like they were a legitimate image that was shot in a single frame, that's not the goal in all of this. The goal in this is to make these as closely integrated as we can do it, so that when you're bringing multiple objects, figures, backgrounds, whatever it is, together into a single image, it looks as if it was actually photographed as a single image. That's kind of the goal in this. We don't always get there, but that's what we're going to try for. Because if you can do that, then doing the fantastical stuff is simple. That doesn't matter at all. So if we are actually doing that, I'm going to again, let's just say we've got a person that we shot in the studio and a landscape that we shot, and we are going to bring them together. What about those things has to match? You should be writing this down when we come up with our list. What about them has to match so that it looks like the image is believable? The lighting. What else?
The
shadows. That would fall under lighting to me, but yes, shadows. It's worth calling them out because they're the nightmare of every compositor. So I've got lighting, shadows. What else, guys? When you're talking about lighting, what do you mean by lighting?
Like the lighting on a person's.
Like the quality, right?
Yeah.
Like, is it for me, I'm going to start with direction, right? If all of a sudden all the light in your background is coming from the left and the lighting on your figure is coming from the right, they don't match, right? So lighting direction, that would be the one. I would be more specific about that. We've talked about shadows, other things. Color. What else does color involve? Saturation, not just hue, but saturation. They have to match. Other things. So here's my list. Lighting direction, exposure. No one mentioned that. You have a subject that's 3 stops underexposed in a landscape that's 2 stops overexposed. Will not fit. So anyway, lighting direction, exposure, contrast, color, saturation, shadows, scale. What about scale? You've got a person standing next to a building that you know. If there's a person standing next to the John Hancock building and they're the same height, probably more fantastical than real. And then finally, and this is the one that gets everyone, and this is what we're going to start with today, is perspective. Now, a lot of people don't really understand what perspective actually is. We're going to do a really deep dive in perspective. But what I can tell you is this. When you look at a composite and you say to yourself, okay, there's something here that just doesn't look right, but I don't know what it is, 99 times out of 100, it's perspective. So, that being said, we're going to do a deep dive into perspective. I need everybody in here to really have their A game when we do this. So I've got 155 right now. Let's take a hard 10-minute. Definitely get a cup of coffee or a really sugary drink or something to give you energy to get through the rest of this part, because it's a lot. So I want everybody to do this with me, please. You've got this folder that's got these images in it. I want it to go through this so that you can really experience this part of it all. So if you take a look in your session number 9, there is a folder called Perspective. And inside that, you will see there's 4 files. I want you to open the one that's at the very top, the one that says 01-01 Perspective, and bring this into Photoshop. So, and double click the hand, you'll get it up as big as you can get it. So, there are a few people that I follow on YouTube. If you're going to do that, I suggest that you only do the really good people that are doing Photoshop stuff on YouTube. The person who built this file, his name is Jesus Ramirez. He runs a channel on YouTube called the Photoshop Training Channel. I think it's a PTC. Yeah, Photoshop Training Channel. He's connected with Adobe. He's a very smart guy. He really knows his stuff. This entire file was created by him. He used to be, or he probably still is. There used to be a way in Photoshop that you could do 3D work. There isn't anymore. Adobe pulled all of the 3D work out of Photoshop and created a brand new program that sits by itself to do 3D work in. However, Jesus is really into this kind of stuff. He created all of the files that are in this image. This is his file. And so I'm one of those people who believes that you should give credit where credit is due. This is how I learned to deal with perspective and think about perspective. And so I want to go through this part first before we jump into how we deal with everything else, because this raises a bunch of issues that you have got to be aware of if you're going to do successful compositing. So to start off with, if you just open it up, what this is supposed to be, again, it's an illustration. So, but the checkered, or not the checkered, but the grid that's on the bottom half of this, you can think of that as the ground. That is the ground plane. And then the sort of like light blue gradient that's at the top half would be the sky. And then where those two meet is what we would call the horizon line. So does that make sense, the orientation here on this? It's relatively simple. Okay, so what I want to start with first is if you take a look over at your layers palette, there are color codes on groups, and we're going to start, the color code that I want to start with is the red one. So if you click on the eyeball for the red one, you won't see anything, but if you click and open this thing up, you will. And so again, I've clicked on the eyeball for the entire red group, and then I've opened up the little triangle, and then first thing that I can actually turn on here is 1-point perspective. It's a group within a group within a group within a group, but if you click on it and turn it on, you will see that there are 3 cubes that have been added to this image, and these 3 cubes are in perspective. And the way you know that they're in perspective is if you scroll down, you will actually see at the very bottom, vanishing point. If you click on this vanishing point, what you will then see is a set of lines, converging lines going away from you. They're in green. It's a little bit hard to see, but it is what it is. Anyway, what you can see is that if you take lines that start at the top front left edge of I'm going to do the box that's on the left right over here, and you draw a line all the way back in your image, and you can go completely through your image. You can go all the way to the edge of your image. It doesn't matter. But then you do the same thing for the other line that's actually right to the right of it, also on the top, and you do the same thing. Those lines eventually will meet. They will converge. And the point that they meet is the vanishing point. That's what it's called. And that point is always on the horizon line. So if you click, there's also a little group on the red layers called horizon line. If you click on that, you will see that in the case of all 3 of these boxes, their converging lines all reach back and land on the horizon line. Now, that doesn't mean that they have to all hit the very same vanishing point, but they will all, the vanishing points of all of them will indeed be on that horizon line. Does this make sense to everyone, what's going on here? This is the thing that the people in the Renaissance discovered or figured out. This is why Da Vinci and Michelangelo's paintings have that realism to them, is they started dealing with real perspective the way that we perceive it to actually be. So if you've done all that, come back up into the layer stack group. There is another layer called free cube. If you can click on that, you will actually see that it is also in perspective. And to prove that to you, right underneath it, under the eyeball right underneath it, if you click on that, it will give you its vanishing lines. So I'm going to turn off the vanishing lines, but I am going to select now the free group layer. So I've not only got the eyeball on, I've made the layer active. I'm going to hit the V key to get the move tool, and I'm simply going to drag this up in the air. And when I get this up in the air, I'm going to turn off the other vanishing lines and the horizon line, and you can see that something here is not right with that free cube. And the thing that's not right is it's no longer in perspective. If you turn on its vanishing lines right now, you can see they still converge, but they land on top of a point that is above the horizon line. This is an impossibility in our world, probably all world. Well, 3-dimensional world, this is not possible. By definition, those would have to land on that vanishing point would have to land on the horizon line. Is this making sense, everyone? Okay, you can come up and to the 1-point perspective group. So again, right inside the diagrams, turn the eyeball off for the whole group, collapse it, and right underneath it, you will have a 2-point perspective group. If you click that one open and turn its eyeball on, you will see that there are 3 different cubes here now, or 3 different, volumes. These are also all in perspective. So underneath it, underneath the 2-point perspective group, when we turned it on, you can click on their vanishing points and you will see you've got 2 sets of vanishing points now because you have 2 sets of converging lines. So the way you can think about this is that imagine you're standing and you're looking at a building that's on the ground and you can see the front of the building and the side of the building at the same time. Those, when they are in perspective, will have 2 sets of converging lines that will both hit their respective vanishing points, and those respective vanishing points will always be on the horizon line. This thing is still on the horizon line. You can click to turn that one on to see. So again, and in looking at these buildings, you can see that they actually make sense in this space, and that's because they are in perspective. So you can turn off the 2-point perspective group and you can collapse it, and then underneath it you can do a 3-point perspective. Turn that group on and open it up. So in a 3-point perspective, you can sort of imagine this as a cube that's floating up in the air, right? It's being suspended up in the air. If underneath it you turn on its vanishing points, what you will see is in a 3-point perspective, you have 3 sets of converging lines. 2 of them will always become a vanishing point and will land on the horizon line. 1 of them does not. It simply goes off into space. But that's in large measure, well, just suffice it to say, you would never have, it would be impossible to have 3 of these 3 sets of converging lines land on the horizon line. You would have no volume to the cube. But in this case, that's what's going on here. And so you say, well, Verser, come on, this is ridiculous. How many times am I going to see cubes floating in the air that are going to screw me up, right? So I want everybody to come up to the image menu and come down to image rotation, and I want you to rotate your image 180 degrees. Now what you're looking at is what it would be like if you were in a helicopter flying over the top of a building. And this would be, again, the 3-point perspective on this. So you can run into these situations in real life, in what you're actually shooting. So drone photography shows this 3-point perspective to death. So I just want you to know that the cube floating in the air, the original version that we looked at, you can hit Command Z to get it back to the way it looked. While this may seem unlikely that you would ever see the bottom of something floating in the middle of the air, the truth of the matter is, if you flip it, you see that looking down on a 3-point perspective happen all the time. Okay, you can turn off the eyeball for the 3-point perspective. You can collapse it. And the final one I want to turn on, and this is the key really one in all of this group, I think, is the top to bottom boxes. Go ahead and turn that on. You can open up the group itself. These boxes are all in perspective, but what you can see happening in here is what you see of the box determines its perspective. So if we look at the box that's on the very bottom, you can see part of the top of the box. I don't think these things have vanishing lines on it. No, they don't have vanishing lines on it. If you then look at the one that is at the very top of my image, I cannot see any of the top of the box because of my perspective. I see the bottom of the box. Is this making sense to everyone? So who have I lost on this part? Because this is the part you really got to think about. Because these are the keys to how you put your images together. So again, I know it seems to make sense. Well, of course, if it's below me, I can see the top of the box. I can't see the bottom. I'm talking about the one at the very bottom. And of course, if it's above me, I can see the bottom of the box. I can't see the top of that. But you see that as you approach the horizon line, you reach a point where ideally, or if it was right in the very middle, you wouldn't be able to see the top or the bottom of the box. So right underneath this is a knockout of a car. Turn the car on. Is this car in perspective? How do you know?
It's above the
It's above the vanishing point, above the horizon line, right? And if it was above the horizon line, what would I be seeing? I would be able to see the bottom of the car. Maybe not, like tons of it, like it was like going to fall on me, but certainly part of it, pretty much like you see in this image right here. I would be seeing part of it, right? I can't. So this is what I was talking about when people will put together comps like this all the time. And you look at it and you go, well, there's just something not right about this, right? And it is the perspective. That is what's causing this. So select the car layer by clicking on it to select and make the whole thing active. Hit the V key, and I want you to pull this down until you feel like it actually is in perspective. And I'm going to pull mine right down about there. Does this car now look like it is in this scene? I mean, granted, it's an illustration with a picture of a real car on it. But this car now is in perspective because I can barely see a little bit of the top of that car, and that puts that area really close to my horizon line. But it has to be below my horizon line. It cannot be above it. If it's above it, I would not be able to see that. Is this making sense to everyone? And then just look at the difference. Go Command Z back and forth. Fake, real, fake, real. Doesn't that feel grounded? It feels like it's sitting on the ground. It's in the scene. It's in that frame. Okay. You can turn off the red eyeball for all the diagrams. You can collapse all of them. And we're going to go down to the next group, the green group, which is people. And click the eyeball to turn that on, and then open up the group. So again, these are these are 3D figures that Jesus Ramirez has created to be in this space. So this group with the people open, you need to scroll down to the bottom. So the men are all at the very bottom. So you can see if you come all the way down to the bottom of that group, there's man number 1 is sitting here. What I want you to notice about man number 1 is where the horizon line bisects him. So you can see it pretty much goes right through halfway between the top of his shoulder and his elbow. If you turn on the eyeball for man number 2, man number 2 is also in perspective, but look where the line of the horizon line bisects him. It is also in that exact same spot. Turn on man number 3, you will see there's another one way the hell back there. Again, the horizon line will always bisect them in the exact same spot if they are the exact same height and they are in perspective. I can't tell you how many bad composites I've seen where people push people into the back and all of a sudden they drop below the horizon line. That is an impossibility. If it is bisecting him here, it will bisect him in the same place in the back, no matter what size they are. We do this to be able to, when we transform in compositing, we transform in perspective just to maintain exactly what's happening right here. So it's not about, oh, I can just make it bigger or smaller, or that fits or that doesn't fit, whatever. You actually have to have it transformed in perspective for your composite to feel like it is real. If you then go up to the squatting figure, so there's one that's called squat number 1, click on that. This is the same man, but he is not bisected. That horizon line does not cut through the middle of his shoulder and his elbow. It doesn't cut through that part. Why not? So let's just say that the guy here is 6 feet tall. How tall is the guy who squatted down? He's 3 feet tall. So again, it would never be because the guy is not the same size. He's a 3-foot guy now, not a 6-foot guy, right? However, the same relationship between the guy and the horizon line is maintained for all the people who are squatting down who are 6 feet tall. So if you click on squat number 2, you will see he is going back in perspective. He is indeed smaller, but there is still the same relative amount of space between his back and the horizon line as there is in this image here in the squat number 1, the bigger one. And you can also go back to squat number 3, and you can see one going way back there. But again, the guy way back there, there's still that space. He would never, no matter how far back you push him, he will never go above the horizon line if he is in perspective. So I know right now you are thinking to yourself, I didn't sign up for this yet. I am trying to give you the clues that you need to actually be not only successful compositors, but people next level, professional and beyond. You can't ignore this because your comps look fake. So as dull as this could possibly be, this is so incredibly important. All right. If you keep going up in the group, there's a woman number 1. Click on her. Now, in her case, the horizon line is not going through her shoulders and she's very close to the same distance away from the camera, very close to the guy, but you can see that the horizon line is cutting through the very top of her shoulders. Why isn't it going through the same middle like the guy? Because she's shorter. So if we keep working our way up, woman number 2 is in the background, but again, if she is in perspective, the horizon line will cut through her in exactly the same spot, no matter how big or small she ends up being, or how, again, this is the illusion of distance away from the camera. It's the same thing. But then come up to woman on box. Click on that. How come it's now cutting through her waist? Exactly, right? She's now 10 feet tall or 11 feet tall because she's standing on a 4-foot or 5-foot box. But if I were to make another woman on a box and push it toward the background, that would be bisecting her at exactly the same spot at the bottom hem of her sweater in every single one of them. So how do we then scale in perspective? So you can turn off all the women. You can turn off the squatting ones. I want to go down to, I want to leave one, we can leave the 3 guys on here. So we'll go ahead and leave the 3 guys visible just so that you can see this is still going to work in perspective. So if you want to work in perspective, we actually did a change to a couple of the things that in our preferences. So if this does not work for you, it's because you did not set your preferences up the way we talked about doing it in our first class. So just let me know if this does not work for you. So I've got the guy here, and I am going to transform him in perspective. So this is how you do it. You got the guy selected. Make sure he is selected. Now, again, if I was going to do this work, this is an exercise file, so I would actually do this with him. I would change him into a smart object first. Transforming is a destructive move, so I would change this. We might as well go ahead, as long as I've said it, let's do it. So come up to your layer menu, down to smart objects, and convert it to a smart object. That way my transforming in here will be non-destructive. And then I'm going to transform him. Command T brings up the transform dialog box. You need to see the center point. This is called the anchor point. It looks like a little star thing right in the middle of this. You've got bounding boxes that are around this, and this little anchor point, you need to be able to see that. If you can't see that, look up at your options menu. There's a little check mark right next to icon that is supposed to be indicating the anchor point. If I turn mine off, you will see that I don't see the anchor point there anymore. You need to have the anchor point visible or you cannot transform in perspective. So then I'm going to move this anchor point. I'm not going to move the image, just the anchor point. Hover over the anchor point itself, click on it and drag it back and put it on the horizon line. This is why you need to know where your horizon lines are in order to do this work. So I've just stuck it back on the horizon line on the right side. And then here's the trick to transforming in perspective. You hold down the Shift and the Option key, and then I'm going to go to the lower left-hand corner. It doesn't really matter which one you do on this. It will be transformed in perspective. And I'm going to just click, and I'm going to start to push. And you will see it pushes him back, but look what happens. That part where it bisects his shoulders is always in the exact same spot. So when I push him all the way back here and then say, hit the check mark and say, okay, you can see it is still bisecting him in exactly the same spot. He has just been transformed in perspective. Yes? How do I do what? I just click on the anchor. Do you see the anchor point? So again, you need to click on the little check mark on the top right hand corner. Got it? And then you can move it. All right, if you've done this, hit Command Z to undo it. So you'll notice we're going to do it again. So again, I've just brought him back up to where he was originally. Command T to transform again, and this time I'm going to drag it to the other side. I'm going to drag it off to the left-hand side. So I'm going to click and pull it all the way over onto the left-hand side. And then again, I'm going to grab the same. I'm going to go from the, the left lower corner. I'm going to hold down the Shift key and the Option key, and I can push him, and he will still stay in perspective. And you can see, you can get him next to the other guy, and it bisects them both at the exact same spot. And if I push him back, it doesn't matter how far back I push him. You can push him back so far, I mean, hopefully you can still see him when he gets back there. And I'm going to say, okay, and yet all the way back there, that horizon line is still bisecting him exactly where it should be, between his shoulders and his elbow. Command Z to undo that. But if you want to just push him away from the camera, I don't want him to go to the right, and I don't want him to go to the left. You do Command T again. You grab the anchor point. You put it right up where you would imagine the anchor point would be. If you cannot see or you cannot guess where the anchor point would be, hit the circle up in the very top in the options bar, the circle with a little slash through it to undo this transform. We can drop a guideline onto our background. So you need to have your rulers showing. If your rulers are not showing, so the rulers are on the top and the left of your image. If they're not showing, you come up to your view menu and you come down to rulers and you put a check mark next to rulers, and then you will see them. And then if you just click on a ruler and drag, it will pull down a temporary guideline. These are non-printing guidelines, so they're just references for us. But this way, I can put this onto the horizon line, and now I can see exactly where the horizon line is behind him. Command T to bring up my transform dialog. Grab my anchor point and bring it right up and set it right onto that guideline, which is the horizon line. Hold down your Shift key and your Option key and click one of the lower corners, and the guide just goes straight away from you. It doesn't only work in this direction. If you pull it towards you, you can bring the guy closer to the camera. How many of you would have expected him to be cropped this way, brought closer to the camera? Again, he is in perspective. Most of you don't do anything close to this. That ends today. Is this making sense to everyone, what's going on here? All right. Let's look at some real world applications of all this. I'm going to cancel out of this. I am going to collapse the people group, the green group, and I'm going to turn its eyeball off. I'm going to then click on the purple group, which are samples. I'm going to open this up, and I've still got that that guideline on my image right now. I don't want to keep this guideline on my image. So to get rid of it, you come up to the view menu, down to guides, clear guides. So again, view menu, down to guides, clear guides, and it will go away. So what do you think about this image? Is this a composite that you would accept and turn in? Is anybody bothered by this? Yes, Emily. It looks weird, right? This is what I was trying to say to you guys. When you're looking at something and you say to yourself, you know, there's something that just isn't right about this, but you don't really know what it is, 9 times out of 10, 99 times out of 100, it is perspective. So let's find out. So if you come down into the sample group, there is a subgroup inside called man. Click this to open it up. And you can see that the guy is actually, it's a full frame, it's an image that has a layer mask. That's what's doing the knockout. If you hold down your shift key and you click on the layer mask, it'll turn it off. And now you can see the original picture of the guy. And the original picture has a horizon. And it is right above his knees. You can see it's right here in this area, right along here. That's where the real horizon is, right? Does that make sense? So just keep in mind that the horizon line of this guy is right above his knees. You can now turn the layer mask off, hold down the shift key, turn it back on, hold down the shift key and click on it. Sorry, the mask, not the guy. So now, to get them in perspective, their horizon lines have to match. That's what perspective would be. So to do that, we're not going to move the guy. We're actually going to move the beach that's above that he's standing on. So if you come down in the group to where it says beach, click on the beach, and then hit the V key to get the move tool. And then I'm just going to click right on my image and drag this straight down until I get the real horizon of the beach just above his knees. And I'm going to let go. Does it have that still same weird feeling to you now? No, he is now in perspective. So to have your figures or all of your elements line up, all of their horizon lines have to match, or you are out of perspective. But look at the difference in this. Again, Command Z to pull it back. Totally fake. Okay, I kind of believe that. Totally fake. Kind of believe that. Yes. So if you just come down and select the beach layer, and then hit the V key, you'll get the move tool, and just click and drag. There's a whole lot more beach image above it. Did that work? Yeah, okay. Did this work for everyone else? Yes. All right, have you just selected just the beach layer? So everything's moving? Yeah, that's because you have this auto select turned on, and it's for the whole group. You never turn that on. I'll try it just there. Yeah. So one of the problems we get into with working on all this, I just want to point this out to everybody just to make sure everybody knows. There is an auto select function in Photoshop. It's right up in the menu bar at the very top. It's right here. And what auto select was designed to do is if you've got an image that's got like 1,000 layers in it and you don't know which layer some particular object or something that you've added into, let's say you've got a composite that it's made up of 1,000 objects. And it's really hard to figure out, okay, well, which one is the little coin that I put in there? It's somewhere around 500, but you really don't know. You can turn on this auto select, and then anything that you click on your image, it will actually take you to that layer. And that's a great thing if you're struggling navigating your images and you've got a lot of layers. But if you leave this thing on by mistake, what ends up happening is that you will end up selecting and moving shit that you didn't plan on selecting because you clicked on something else. So I don't ever turn this on. You not only can do it for layers, but you can do this for groups as well, and then everything in the group will actually move. This is a dangerous thing, and it is a really frustrating thing it drives people crazy. So at any rate, I just wanted to point this guy out. So back to this guy though, we're gonna actually change his background now. So just click on the eyeball for the beach to turn it off, and then come underneath and click on the city and turn it on. And then tell me, is this guy in perspective? He is. How do you know that? Because the horizon lines match. The horizon line of the guy, which is right above his knees, is going right through the horizon line of where the city is meeting the sky. So I can transform this guy in this space. So to do this, go up and select the guy layer. We are going to transform him. Again, I would turn this into a smart object, but you already know that. So I'm just moving on so that we're using our time. Command T to bring up the transform dialog box. And you can see now I've got transform control handles that are way outside of my image. I don't have corners that I can really get at to, I don't think, I'm not sure. So I'm going to click on the circle at the top with the slash through it to get rid of the transform. And now I'm going to go to my pasteboard, the F key, because the F key will show me controls outside of my image. And I'm going to do the same thing again now, Command T. So it turns out that I do have those control handles, that part's fine. But to actually now transform this guy, I need to grab my anchor point and I need to put it on the horizon line. I'm going to send him over to the right on this one. So I'm going to put it on the horizon line, and then holding down the Shift key and the Option key, I'm going to click the lower left-hand corner, and I'm going to push this guy out in space like he's Superman or something. Anyway, I'm going to get him all the way out there, and then I'm going to click OK, the check mark. He is now floating in space in perspective. However, people get flipped about, well, where you put your anchor point is on the horizon line, but it always moves him to the right. Once he's out there, you can move him to the left or the right without changing his perspective. His perspective will, it's again, where does the horizon line bisect him and what size is he relative to that? So if you wanted to relocate him, say more to the center of your image, hit the V key to get the move tool. If you hold down your Shift key now and move him right or left, actually that's not true. If you start to move him right or left and then add your Shift key, you won't be able to move him up or down. And you can move him all the way to the left or all the way to the right. It doesn't matter. He will always be, or well, way far to the right, whatever. He will still be in perspective. You can see the horizon line is still bisecting him in the exact spot that it is supposed to. Are we good on this part? All right. We need to go back to the original guy. So if you're using the new version of Photoshop's Command Undo, it's just Command Z, Command Z, Command Z. If you use the older version, which I showed you guys in setting up in our preferences, you have to add the Option key to it. So I'm going to just do Command Z, Command Option Z, Command Option Z twice, and he comes back to the way he is right now. So then the final thing that we're going to do is scroll down. We're going to turn off the city, and you're going to turn on the station one that's right underneath it. So he is now in a subway station. I'm going to temporarily turn him off. I'm going to click so that you don't see him anymore. You'll still see his shadows under his feet. You don't need to worry about that. But I'm going to show you now how you actually find the horizon line of space if you're lucky enough to have converging lines. And in this case, we are. So this is much easier work to do on the pasteboard than it is to do it any other way. So anyway, I'm going to stay on the pasteboard here. But remember, converging lines will give us, converging lines where they intersect will give us our vanishing point. And in this case, I've got tons of converging lines. I've got this, the sort of like the banister part of the stairwell right here is a converging line. The lights on the top, the fluorescent lights, are converging lines. The top edge of the subway car is a converging line. The railroad tracks are converging lines. The warning line on the railroad tracks are converging. All of these are converging lines, and they all go to the same single vanishing point. So there are people who do this using a tool, using the line tool and all that. I don't do any of that shit. I do this all with the pen tool. It's just the easiest. So I'm going to hit the P key to get the pen tool, and I'm just going to drop a mark on the front edge of the banister right here, and I'm going to go all the way to the back, and then you're going to move this up and down so that the line that you're drawing, the pen tool line that you're drawing, scribes the very edge of that banister. That is a converging line, and I'm just going to click once. Then I'm going to come down, and actually I'm going to click on the railroad track. So I'm clicking on the outside of the railroad track. I'm going to pull my line all the way to the other side, and then again I'm going to move it up and down until it perfectly scribes along the edge of the railroad track. And I'm going to click again. At this point, I have got my vanishing point. It's where those two lines intersect in the very back. I'm going to come up to my ruler. I'm going to click on my ruler and drag a guideline down to that intersection. If you have trouble, if it wants to snap to something, you can actually add your control key and it'll take away that snap behavior. And we're going to drop a line right there. That is my horizon line. I'm then going to go to my path palette and throw that work path away. It's done its job. This is the horizon line of this image. Then I'm going to come back to the guy, back to my layers palette. I'm going to turn the guy back on. And you can see in this case, he is out of perspective. In order for me to get him in perspective, he needs to be taller. He needs to be lifted up. So I'm going to select this layer. I'm going to hit the V key to get the move tool, and I'm going to move the guy straight up until that horizon line is actually right above his knees. How tall do you think this guy is now? Well, if you think that the car is probably, I don't know, 15, 16, 17 feet tall, he's like 16, 17 feet tall, right? Why? What? It's not scale, it's perspective. These two images were shot completely out of perspective. If you hold down your shift key and you click on the mask for the guy, it'll turn it off. You can see that the angle that the camera was at, you can watch me, you won't see this on the video, but you can see it right here. I'm down like this, shooting this guy. I am at his knee level shooting him. All the rest of him is up above me, right? But on the shot of the subway, they're up on top of something. They are like this, shooting down on the subway. Those are radically different perspectives, and you cannot shove those together. The only solution to this, you can try to fake it. There's no real way to fix it. The only true way to fix it is that you have got to reshoot one or the other. You either go to the station and you come down low like this and shoot so that it matches the perspective of the guy, or you get the guy back on the lake and you climb up on a ladder or a small, in the trunk of a car or something like that. You get up high enough to come down to get the same perspective as the station. This much of a mismatch you will never, ever get to put together. So I'm going to show you how to sort of kludge this. It's not perfect, but at least it'll get you closer. But is this making sense, what's causing this, right? So you need to be thinking about that when you're shooting your composite stuff. This is why I'm bringing this up and making this such a big deal. You can't just go out and shoot a bunch of backgrounds and go in the studio and shoot a bunch of pictures and hope that you can push these two things together, because that is not how it works. So I'm going to hit Command Z to undo that part. Command Option Z, I want to get him back where he really was in the beginning. So he's low on the ground. I know where my horizon line is right now. I am going to temporarily hide my horizon line because I don't like doing this work with a whole bunch of shit on my image. So I'm going to hit Command H, Control H if you're on Windows. The first time you hit that in Photoshop, you should get a dialog box that opens up and says, do you want to hide extras or do you want to hide Photoshop? You always want to pick hide extras. Extras are things like guidelines. Extras are things like marching ants. Extras are things like any of those non-printable, non-part of your image elements that we use when we're working in Photoshop. Those are extras. So at any rate, I'm just temporarily hiding it. It's easy. So now I'm going to realize that there's no way I'm going to be able to get this guy in perspective, but at least I can get him scaled right. So that's what I'm going to actually do next. So to scale the guy right, you need to actually pick the guy. So make sure that the layer that has the guy on it is selected. We are going to turn this into a smart object because we are going to do multiple transforms of him, and every one of those is destructive unless it is a smart object. So up to the layer menu, down to smart objects, convert to smart object. And then I'm just going to make him smaller to begin with. So I'm going to hit Command T to make him smaller. And I'm not going to try and do this in perspective. I'm just going to make him smaller. If you do what I just did, you'll distort him. Typically, I will actually click on the link between width and height up at the top so that when I move one thing, it moves both things and he is still in perspective. And I'm not in perspective. His ratio remains consistent. He doesn't get wider or skinnier or taller or shorter, any of that. Well, he gets, yeah, you guys get where I'm going. And I'm going to put him back next to the door. I'm going to zoom into the door of the rail car. So I'm going to continue to make this guy smaller, and I'm going to put him right back next to the door. So again, click on the link between the two, make him smaller, and I'm going to put him so that his foot is right on the door, not down on the ground, but on the door jamb, whatever. And you can see right now the guy is actually, in my case, he's still taller than the door. You've got to get him small, and how much smaller would you get him? Well, you need to think and use your memory. So, everybody here has probably ridden the L at some point, right? When you're on the train and you are looking at the door, do you have to look down to see out the window, or do you look straight out the window? You can see straight out the window, right? That window glass is actually slightly taller than most people, right? Not hugely, because again, the train is not 20 feet tall. But you can actually use your experience to say that, okay, well, I'm still looking at this. No, he's got to be even shorter than this. I've got to pull him down even more. He's going to be more like, I wish this would quit undoing that. He's got to be down more like this. And again, when you move one thing, you've got to move them both. So again, make sure his foot's on the door. He's a little too short there. I'm going to bring him up a little bit. Make him slightly taller. That's where I'm going to go for him to be scaled correctly for this door. Maybe just up a little touch more. Yeah, that feels about right to me. And then I'm going to go ahead and say okay to this. Now, in this case, he's standing up on the edge of this. He would not be there. So I'm going to drag him straight out and down so that it looks like he is across from this. And this is how I would actually scale him at least correctly. Now, he is still woefully out of perspective. If you hit Command H again, you can see that the horizon line of the image is above his head. It's supposed to be at his knees. That's the price you pay. Questions about this? I'm going to hit the F key again to go back to the full black pasteboard. F key one more time to get back to the stoplight parts, and we can actually close this guy up, and you do not need to save this. All right, I'm going to show you something really quickly. Most of you, I'm not even sure I included it in your student folder. Yeah, I did. If you have an older version of Photoshop, you can actually, Capture One, you can actually load this. I'm going to say don't bother loading this right now. It'll take us an hour to get everybody with this thing loaded. So I'm just going to show it to you really quickly. So we need to think about this. You want to build composites, right? So we're going to do, again, exactly what I said. We're going to do a person in the studio and a landscape in the back, landscape outside, and we're going to put those two together, right? Which do you shoot first? Why?
Find the horizon line.
Oh, that's actually a good call. I like that. That would be one thing, but other reasons. Why would you do the landscape first? Lighting. You can't control the lighting of your landscape. I mean, you can control exposure, you can do those sorts of things. You can dodge and burn and do that kind of stuff, whatever. But basically, if you go out on a bright sunny day and you shoot pictures, or you go out on a really cloudy day and shoot pictures, those are two very different things, right? And it's much easier to go into the studio and emulate a bright sunny day or emulate a really cloudy day than it is to say to yourself, oh, well, I'm going to go. How do you actually turn a sunny day into a cloudy day? You can't do it. I don't care how good you are at doing this game, whatever. It just doesn't work that way. So you do your landscapes first because it's so much easier to match that in the studio. And you need to think about that way. Believe me, this is the voice of experience talking. I actually did a full photo shoot once that was all going to be composited. We did everything in the studio first. And then I was forced to go find situations that had that same lighting and had the same lighting direction and all of that. So forget trying to pick the landscapes that you want to shoot. You are just desperate to get anything that has lighting that matches what you've already done in the studio and paid a fortune to actually shoot. It was awful. Do not do that. If you're going to do this kind of stuff, shoot your landscape. Shoot the stuff that you cannot control first, because the stuff that you can control, you can then get to match. All right, so with that being said, I'm going to show you a shooting that I did a long time ago and how I approach it, and then we'll take a break. All right, so this is the image that I actually started with. This is my location image. This is a picture of my wife. And I've got a shot of this with her in it, and I've got another shot of her not in it. They're not color correct. They're not balanced yet here. We'll talk about doing that in just a minute. Anyway, so I shoot my background first. What does this give me? Go back to our list. Hopefully you copied this down. What were our list of things that had to match? The first one. Lighting direction. Can I tell the direction of the lighting from this? Sure I can. It's an overcast day. It's simple. Do you see any direct light in this? Sunlight screaming through the leaves and throwing... No, it's direct overhead, right? Overcast. The exposure in this, can I tell the exposure on this? How? I use the color card, right? I can actually come in on this image. I can then do a white balance in this and measure the white patch. Haven't we talked about that in this class? Right? And what should that white patch read? 245 to 250 in that range. You were close. Close. 245 to 250 in that range. Why shouldn't that white patch be 255? I'm sorry? Well, the thing is that if it is, it's page white. It has no texture. That thing's real. It has texture. If I take it to 255, I've blown it out. So that's why I do the really close. 245 to 250 is really close, but it is not page white. That would be overexposed. I can do the very same thing in the studio, right? So I can match exposure. So I'm back up here. What else do I get from this? Again, color and saturation, that's a tough one on this, except to say this, and this one's really critical. So this card will give me a neutral color in the light that I'm in, no matter what it is. So I will white balance this, and then I can also, here, I'll actually do it. I can white balance on this part, and this is now neutralized color. I can then go to my image on the inside the studio and white balance on that. They now have the same color by definition. And when I put them together into a comp, they have the same color. Once I get that put together, once I have them both together, then I can make my image either colder or warmer, or I can split tone my image and make my shadows bluer and my highlights warm. I can do all of those things once it's together. But if you start out with an image that is really warm and you've got another image that's really cold and you try to put those things together, then you are going to tear your hair out trying to get them to match. This gives me a commonality, so when I put it together, then I can go in and say, oh yeah, I want the whole comp to be really cyanic. Yeah, Pablo.
In the process of shooting, like, of course you have different light in terms of like what you have as your backdrop and then the model. How is the color card keeping the same exact values even though the light is different? It doesn't matter?
Oh no, it totally matters. But again, I'm in a same sort of like situation here. If the light on the figure that's out in the woods, if this has been neutralized for the light falling on her, that's neutralized all of the available light that there is. So whatever's hitting the background is going to be neutralized as well. Make sense? Okay. So Anyway, so I've got lighting, direction, exposure. I've got, again, contrast is a little iffy. They are not the same contrast. My lighting in the studio is overhead, but it's a much contrastier light because it's so close to the person, so I've got to work on that. Color and saturation, there are different ways that we will work on that, but at least the color part, I've got them to be common. That doesn't mean I'm going to not fine-tune it. I will fine-tune it eventually. Saturation is, again, another thing that you're going to have to fine-tune. Shadows. Again, this tells me exactly what my shadows should actually be like. I can look at this right here, and I can see the quality of the shadow that's right underneath her feet right here. This gives me the clue about what the shadow in my figure needs to actually look like. Scale. Does this give me scale? Of course it does, right? My wife's 5'7". I've got scale here. I'm actually going to use her to scale the other figure that's right next to it. And then finally, the perspective, right? I know where, again, I don't see horizon lines here. I don't have converging lines here, but I do have her here, and I know relatively where my camera was, where I was standing. People will make notes about this part. I was standing 6 feet tall, or I was crouched down on the ground like a combat, veteran shooting pictures really low. I mean, whatever it is, you keep track of that stuff and you go into the studio and you try to recreate that. But what I wanted to show you here is you can see that there's a series of rocks that are in here. I wanted this girl to actually here to be looking like she was standing on those rocks, and I do it using overlay. So if you bring in, again, this was the figure that I shot first. I could bring this into Capture One, into the overlay group, and if you turn on the overlay part and then click on this image right here, you can see you get a balance overlay on this. I'm going to move my figure of my wife so that she's close to where the girl on the girl in the studio is. There is an opacity slider that lets you go back and forth, so you can go back and forth. And then what I simply did was I used sandbags to try to emulate the rocks that she's actually standing on. The more that you can actually do to get them into the situation that you are trying to comp them into, the better off you are. Now, if it's just flat street, it's not going to matter that much. But if it's steps or hills, or you can get a foot up on top of something, any of those things help make your comp more believable. Does that sort of make sense? We good on this part? There's another thing that you'll see in this image right here, that there's a bar that's running right across the back of her. I had in another one of these shots, it was literally a tree limb that was going across the back of the comp picture that I had my wife. So this allows this girl to actually put her arms on this and grip something. That gripping, that gives me the shape of her hands that then I can actually wrap around the tree limb that was in the real shot. Those sorts of things are invaluable. And the more you pay attention to this kind of detail, the more successful your comps are ultimately going to be. Is this making sense to everyone so far? Okay. This would be a great time for another break. So I got 3 o'clock, make it another hard 10. I'll see you at 3:10. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is, in your folder, your session number 9, there's another folder called Tree Exercise. If you can click on Tree Exercise, we're going to start our first our first comp here in this class, our first legitimate comp, and we're going to try and push this as far as we can get it to touch as many of the bases as we can possibly do in here. So with Tree Exercise selected, you'll see there are 4 files in here. There's also a composite body in here. You can ignore that one right now. The thing I want to start with are these. There's 2 files. There's one called Trees 13 and another one called Trees 19. I need you to open both of those files in Photoshop. There's XMP files. You don't need to worry about those. You can, if you select them, it won't matter. If you don't select them, it won't matter. Just make sure you select both of the raw files, the CR2 files that have trees on them, that start with the word trees, and then open those into Photoshop. And when they, did I start this recording back again? Yes. When they come into Photoshop, they will come into Camera Raw, and this is where we actually need to start. This is where the color part in this happens. Now, I don't want to use the figure to be my backdrop. I want to actually, though, use it to set up my color and to do all of those sorts of things. So the first thing I'm going to do is make sure that you guys, does everybody have this open? These two open? They need to be open at the same time in Camera Raw. All right. So the first thing I'm going to do is white balance. So if you click on the white balance tool, so it's over in the palettes on the right-hand side. It's the one underneath exposure. Go ahead and select that. I zoom in to make sure that I hit this correctly, and I'm going to click on the little white patch, the gray patch that's right next to the red. That's typically the one I always use. You don't want a white balance using the white, and you also don't want a white balance using the dark. The greatest latitude to be able to change color is if you're picking midtones, and so that's why I picked this one. So now that's actually set my color on here. I already know my exposure is correct on this. If you hover over the white patch and look up at my histogram, you will see that it reads 245, 245, 244. So that's in my range where I'll ultimately want to be in this. So then I need to actually apply these settings. The only thing I've done is white balance to the other image. So to do that, you hover over the thumbnail of the image that has the color card in it, and at the top right-hand corner, you'll see little 3 dots show up. You click on those little 3 dots, and you'll get a flyout menu, and you want to click on Select All. And you'll notice that puts a light gray border around the other image. That's telling you that these are both still selected, but the one that's got the color card in it is the one that's in control. So then you're going to go right back up to that same thumbnail in that same area, top right-hand corner, the same 3 little dots, click on that, and then come down to Sync Settings. And then a dialog box will open up and say, well, what do you want to sync? And the default syncs everything except for lens blurring and cropping and masking and all. All we changed was the white balance of this, and so we're fine on that. So I'm just going to say OK. And now these both have the exact same color balance to them. They both have the same white balance to them. Now, I want to open both of these. I don't want to just open one. I want to open both of these. And you'll see down in my lower right-hand corner, it says Open Objects Plural, because these are both selected. If I click on that, it's going to open both of them in Photoshop, which is what I want to do. So I'm going to click on this, and it's actually going to open both of them up. Now, for those of you who have tab behavior on, you can see one of your images, but you can't see the other one unless you click on that tab, in which case you're going to lose the first one. So this is why I don't use tab behavior in Photoshop, especially when I'm doing compositing work. If you want to turn your tab behavior off because it'll drive you absolutely out of your mind, come up to the Photoshop menu. If you're on Windows, it's at the bottom of your edit menu. If you're on Mac, it's at the right underneath the Photoshop. Come down to Settings, and then in Settings, I'm going to go to General. And in General, the first tab here, I'm going to skip down to Interface, Workspace. And in Workspace, there's 2 things you need to uncheck. The first one is Open Documents as Tabs, and the second one is Enable Floating Document Window Docking. If you uncheck both of those and then say OK, then as you start to open multiple images, they will all float, and you can actually then move around and make sure you're moving elements from one to another correctly. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the one that's got the figure in it. I'm going to come over to my Layers palette. I'm going to grab the thumbnail of my layer palette, and I'm going to drag it on top of the image that does not have the color card or the girl in it. Before you let go, hold down your Shift key. That will center the layer that you're moving to the image that you're moving it to. So hold down the Shift key and let go, and you can see it's brought it in. There was a slight movement in that, which is fine. I don't care about that part because I was hand holding all of this. If I'd been on a tripod, that wouldn't have happened, but that's fine. Everything I need, I can still get to. Then I'm going to go back to the image that is just the girl with the color card, and I'm going to close it up. I don't need this anymore. I've already got a copy of it on top of the image that has actually got the blank background underneath it. Yes?
How did you do that? Sorry.
It's okay. I'll show you again. Okay, they're both color balanced. I'm going to open both objects. I've got two images now. I've got one that has the card in it. Sorry, that did not do that because I didn't select it. Slow down. So in this case, they're both up here. I need to do a select all so that I'm opening both of them. Again, I've done the color balance on these. The XMP file remembered that. So they're both the same color. And then I'm going to hit open objects, and I get both of these images open. I've got one that doesn't have the girl in it and one that does. You good on that? Make the girl active, the one that has the girl in it, because this is the layer I need to copy to the other image. So come over, you don't drag the image, you drag the layer, the thumbnail of the layer. You drag this on top of the other image. Before you let go, hold down the shift key so that you center it, and then let go. And now you've got a single image that has both of those images inside it. We good? And then I close the girl that is by herself because I don't need that anymore. I've got it all here. So now I've actually got reference in here that I can use. So then I'm going to go to part 2 of this. I'm going to go back to my folder. There are 2 images in here now that were shot in the studio. There's this ENG 102706 and this frame number 1, and then another one, frame number 47. Select both of those. We're going to do the exact same thing we just did. Hold down the shift key, the command key, and select the other one. Drag both of these onto Photoshop. Both will come in Camera Raw. I'm going to do the very same trick I did. I'm going to zoom in onto the color card. I'm going to grab the white balance tool. I'm going to select the gray that's right next to the red. I'm going to then come up to the little, on the thumbnail, up at the top right hand corner of the thumbnail, click on the little 3 dots and do select all. They're now both selected. I'm going to then go back to the same little 3 dots and come down and do sync settings. That's going to apply. I'm going to say, okay, that applies the color settings to the other one. Now, in this case, I don't need the girl with the card. I just need the girl who is without the card, the girl who's in the pose. So I'm selecting the one on the bottom. It is now color balanced and correct. It's all of those things. I'm going to then say open as object, and this will come into Photoshop as well. If this happens to you where you still see a whole bunch of the rest of your computer, you're seeing I'm seeing the Finder in here, all that kind of stuff, simply come up to the Photoshop menu, come down and do hide others, and it'll get rid of all of that other stuff, and it'll be the space that you think you're supposed to be in. And now I'm going to do the same trick that I just did. I'm going to grab the one that's got the girl in it, and I'm going to drag it over onto my scene that's got the girl with the card and the forest without anyone in it. Hold down the shift key and let go, and then I'm going to close this up as well. So I'm going to click on this to get rid of the image that I've already got the layer. They are all 3 together now. I don't need to save this. So I've got the girl on top, I've got the girl underneath this, and then I've got the trees and the last one underneath it. So does everyone have all 3 of these together? Okay, great. So then I can use this to scale the girl. I'm going to actually use the one on the very top. I'm going to grab the opacity slider and I'm going to simply drop it down. And it is a smart object, so I am going to be able to transform this. First thing I'm going to do is move it. I'm going to hit the V key to get the move tool, and I'm going to move this so that her feet, or especially her right foot, is where my wife's right foot is. That's where I'm going to actually start with this. But you can see in this case now she's too small, but she's in place. She's sort of like in place. I'm going to now scale this and watch to see how big this needs to be. So I'm going to hit Command T to bring up the transform dialog box for the girl that's in the studio. I am, again, in this case, I don't have my control handles. So I'm going to cancel out of that by hitting the circle with the slash through it. I'm going to hit the F key to go to my pasteboard, and now I'm going to hit Command T again. And this way I've got all of my control handles. You can see I can get to my control handles everywhere. I'm going to click on the link between the width and the height. So up at your options bar, it's the little chain link between W and H. I'm going to click on that so that when I move one thing, it'll actually, when I make it taller, it will also make it wider. It keeps the ratio. However, if you do this right now, the anchor point is right in the middle. You can see the anchor point is right about where her crotch is. Transforming happens around the anchor point. And so what's going to happen is when I make her taller, it's also going to move her feet. Her feet are going to head down. Her head is going to go up. And then I've got to reposition it and then retransform it a little bit more and then reposition it again. It's a pain in the ass to do that. So instead, click on your anchor point and drag it down and put it right on the toe of both of them. So now this will transform around that point. And so now when I make this taller, I'm going to just click on the top right-hand corner and I'm going to make it taller. You can see her foot does not move, or her foot should not move, even though it is, because that anchor point is right there and it is not moving around her foot. Huh. Well, then we're going old school, guys. So we're just going to make this taller. So my wife is 5'7". This model is at least 5'9", if not 5'10", and she's also in heels. That makes her 6 feet tall. So she's 5 inches taller than my wife. Is this about 5 inches taller than my wife? It looks about right. Yeah, something like that. I'm going to reposition this so that their feet are together again and get my wife, get the girl in the studio a little bit taller. What's the difference between my nose and my top of my head? Is that 4 inches, 5 inches about? Yeah, so that's basically what I'm looking for right here. Yeah, so again, her nose, top of her head. So she's scaled about right now. So I'm going to go ahead and say okay to that. Click on the check mark. And then I'm simply going to crank my opacity all the way up again. And then I would do the knockout. I don't want to spend time doing the knockout, so I've already made it for you. So we need to go back to our regular workspace, not the pasteboard. Hit the F key once to go to the black pasteboard, the F key again to go to the regular one, and then go back to that same folder. And in that same folder, there is a composite body 2 PSD file. It's this girl, it's this image that we're working on, already knocked out for you. So I'm going to click on this and bring this into Photoshop. And hide others. And then this is actually a smart object that has already got the knockout built into it. So if you double click on this and to open the smart object, you can see this is where I've got my knockout, the image is knocked out. I've actually got a copy of the raw data in here. I've got the spill has been removed on this guy, so I'm good to go. I'm gonna close this back up again. I'm gonna drag this now, my composite body 2, on top of the composite that I'm already working on, the one that's got the girl in the green screen in the background. Hold down the shift key and let go, and you can actually see she's close to the other figure. I'm going to get rid of the composite body 2. Housekeeping is major when you get in this, because you can see if I've left everything open right now, I would have 6 images open on this, which is a nightmare to try to deal with. That's not what I'm going to do. So instead now I can move this girl around to try to get her to be the same as the other girl that's in the background. And you'll see they're incredibly close. I mean, I've done this 1,000 times, but they're, extremely close in here. So I'm going to go ahead and say that's okay. I'll keep her there. And then I'm going to throw away the layer that has the green screen showing on the background. And this is the beginning of my composite. I also don't need the one that's got my wife in there as well. The background that's got my wife in there, I'm going to throw that away as well. And now I've just got the figure that I need in here and the background. These two are the ones that I've got and that I'm going to continue to work on. Is everybody at this stage? All you have is the knocked out girl on the clean background. Are we good on this part? Because if you're not good here, it's only going to get worse. You really need to let me know if you're not at this point. Okay, then at that stage of the game, I would save my file. Again, this is not going to be homework, but I would save the file. So I'm going to do a save as. Make sure that it's either a Photoshop or a TIFF file. Give it some kind of name. I'm just going to throw this in my TOS folder and say OK. That way we can recover if we need to. Okay, so the first thing that I'm going to do here is I'm going to actually reorient her slightly. She's scaled right, so I can move her around a little bit. I don't want to really push her back into space, but she's scaled pretty well. However, when I actually shot this picture in the studio, this part of her heel was supposed to be touching the back of this rock that's right here. So I'm simply going to move her. I've hit the V key, and I'm just going to, that's actually moving my background. Command Z to undo that. Make sure that you've selected the comp body. And I'm going to move this up a little bit so that it looks like her heel is right on the edge of this background part. Now it makes this other foot look like it's floating in space. That's okay. I'm going to take care of that in just 1 second. Again, I would save this. It's closer to what we're actually looking at to be. Now, it doesn't look real to me because she has no shadows under her feet. She's just floating there in space. So we have done a little bit of shadow in this room, haven't we? We've used the gradient tool to build shadows in here. We're going to do the same thing again here really fast. So I'm going to select my background layer, the trees layer, because you want your shadows to be between the background. You want them to be on top of the background, but underneath the figure. There's no way in hell you can have a shadow that's being cast by the figure that would be on top of the figure. It only is going to hit the background. So click on the background layer, the trees. We're going to add an empty layer on top of this. So just click on the little square with the plus in the middle. I'm going to double click on the name and call it Shadow 1. Then I'm going to hit the G key. That will actually give you the gradient tool. When you get the G key and the gradient tool selected, you need to come up to your options panel up at the very top. In my case right now, I've got colors in my foreground and background colors. I'm going to hit the D key to default those to black and white. And then I'm going to, again, come up to my options panel up at the very top on the left-hand side. If you've got a click drop-down menu, you've got two options here. You've got gradient, and then you've got classic gradient. I want you to use the classic gradient for this. It's simpler, and we don't need the controls of the new gradient tool. Then in the next frame over, it's a preview of what the gradient is going to be, you need to click on that drop-down menu, and you will get a whole series of gradients that are in groups. I want you to open up the basic group, and I want you to select the gradient that's in the middle, which if you hover over it, it says foreground to transparent. You want to select that one. And then finally, in the 5 types of gradients that run across the little icons at the top, you want to pick the second one from the left. That is a radial, that's a circular gradient. So that's the one that we're going to actually pick. If the preview in here is white to transparent, you simply need to flip your foreground and background colors. Use the X key to do that. You'll see I've made white my foreground color, and that's white to transparent. We don't make white shadows, we make black ones. So I'm going to click on the X key. So you should be ready to rock on this. So the first one I'm going to go after is the shadow that's going to go underneath her right foot. So I'm going to start over here. It doesn't matter where you start. We're going to move it anyway. I'm going to simply click over here and drag out, and it makes a gradient that fades to transparency. It's a circular gradient. Then I'm going to transform this gradient, Command T. When you do that, you get control handles that come on both sides. I need to flatten this so it's more like a pancake instead of this circle. To do that, you want to hold down the Option key. I'm going to grab this top handle, the handle that's in the very top in the middle. If I just grab this handle and don't use any modifier and bring it down, you can see it crushes it, but it doesn't actually move the bottom up at the same time. So I lose the symmetry of my shadow. So I'm going to hit Command Z to undo that. Instead, hold down your Option key, and when you do this now, your Option key, it will bring both handles in. And I'm going to crush this down to make it relatively flat. I'm going to then click and move it over here. You want to avoid moving, clicking near the anchor point, or it'll move the anchor point instead of your shadow. I'm going to bring it up here kind of close, and then I'm going to do the same trick. I need to make it less wide. So I'm going to click on the right control handle, hold down the Option key, and click to bring this in so it's considerably tighter. Now, this is what I was talking about where Command H really comes into hand. I can't see shit here because of all the control handles and the anchor point and everything else. So if you hit Command H, it temporarily hides that, but it's still there. You can still move it around. You can still continue to transform it. But I'm going to leave mine right where it is. You can also use your arrow keys to move it slightly up or down. So in my case, I think I've made this too narrow. I need to make it a little bit wider. Command H will bring back your control handles. Hold down the Option key and click and drag it a little bit wider. Command H to hide it, and this actually looks pretty good to me. I'm going to make it a little bit lower, and I feel pretty good about that. So I'm going to hit the check mark up at the very top. Immediately hit the E key for the eraser tool. We need to clean up where this is because there's shadow that is going on both sides of her feet. There's one on the right side, one on the left. There's nothing that would make those shadows. The shadow is under her foot. It's a contact shadow. That's the only place. So I'm going to scrub on this side to get rid of the shadow there, and also on the opposite side to get rid of it here. And this is the grounding shadow that I've actually got for her. Looks great. I'm going to do the same thing for the other foot over here, but I'm going to add a new layer to do it on. So come down to the bottom of your layers panel, the little box with the plus in the middle, click on it, double click on the name and call it Shadow 2. And then it's the same thing all over again. The G key to get the gradient tool. Click and drag down. You've got the gradient. Command T, hold down the Option key, collapse them both. So now in this one, I'm trying to get the shadow that goes underneath her other foot. It's on an angle. It's not a perfect square like this. So you get your control handles outside. You can't do this inside the transform box. You got to be on the outside. You'll see that your cursor turns into a double-headed arrow. You can now rotate this thing, which is what I'm going to do. I'm going to rotate it so that it goes underneath her foot. Now what I'm also going to do is I am going to drag this way out. If you take a look at the way this shadow is working right now, it goes from, in the center, it's really pretty heavy, it's pretty wide, and then it tapers off to something small at the end. I like that part of it. I don't like what happens on the opposite side. So both the right edge of this shadow is very narrow, the left edge is very narrow. That makes sense when the shadow goes back to her heel. It does not make sense when it actually goes in front of her. So I'm going to show you what I'm talking about. I'm going to hit Command H to get rid of those handles. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to place the center part of the shadow underneath the front of her foot where it would be the heaviest, and then as it's starting to fade into the back, I can actually leverage the fact that that shadow is getting more narrow. To see what I'm really talking about, guys, I'm going to see if I can show you what this thing looks like by itself. Hold on one second. That's what it looks like. Yet the heavy part of the shadow right here is right under her toe. I'm going to erase all of this shadow that's in the front. I'm going to leave this fade shadow in the back because that's actually what would happen. Her heel, it's up in the air, and so there's more light that's coming in to that part, to that area, so it wouldn't be as heavy as the contact shadow that's directly under her foot. So then I'm going to bring everybody else back. So I feel like it's in the right spot right here. So I'm good with this. So I'm going to go ahead. I've gone ahead and said okay to this. I'm going to hit the E key to get the eraser, and you're going to get rid of this whole shadow part that's in the front because it would never be, there's nothing in the front that would cause that shadow. So this is now what my other one looks like, and you can see when you turn it on and off, I've still got a little bit of shadow that's right out here in the front. So I'm going to turn this on and off again. And I feel like that part looks really good. I'm going to double click on my hand to kick back out. And she's now grounded in this. If you want to be able to turn your shadows on and off at the same time, hold down your Shift key and select both of the shadows. Come up to the hamburger thing that's on the side. Click on this and say New Group from Layers and call it Shadows. And now you can turn the whole group on and off. Floaty girl, anchored girl. Okay, save your work. So did this work for everyone? Are you feeling somewhat good about this part? It's the easiest way there is to make shadows, guys. There are people who can go in who are really good at painting, painters, right? And they can go in and do this by hand. I can't do that. I can't. And this works shockingly well. Okay, so this part's actually working really well for me right now. But the problem that I have is that there are so many mismatches going on in here, right? Number one, look how contrasty this girl is. There is no way in hell, if I was shooting this, that her jacket would be anywhere near this contrasty, right? That just wouldn't happen. So we need to fix this. Now, I'm going to show you, there's an action that I've made for you that you need to load. But we're going to move into now what we call check layers. And what check layers do is they actually give you ways to isolate components of your image in order to get a better balance. So I've already made these for you. If you want to, we're going to just load it right now. So to load them, and then I'll show you. If you want to make your own, or if you want to go deeper into how I made these, if you want to understand that behind all of that, fine, you can go into it. Here, I'll show you really quick. So it's right here. It's in this same group right here. There is a action set that is called check layers, and then there's this PDF called check layers PDF. If you open this up, this tells you how to make them. So if you want to make them from scratch, great. I've made action set for you that we just run and use. It's easier. But if you want to do the deep dive, or you want to save this in case you lose your action set or whatever, then you'll have this. It'll all be available for you. So to actually load this action set in Photoshop, you want to go to your actions palette. So click on actions palette on the on the tab for your actions palette. Come over to the menu that's just to the right of it. Click on this, and you're going to come down to import actions. Where are you? Load actions, not import. You're going to come down right into the middle to load actions. So again, make sure that your action tab is selected. Click on the little menu to the right of it and come down to load actions. Can everybody find this? Because guys, you're going to use this action set for the rest of the semester, so do not slack on this one. You want this loaded. Click on load actions, and this will open up, and you need to navigate to your session number 8 folder. So again, Columbia, retouching, it's session 9, sorry, it's not 8. In your student folder, and right inside there, there is this thing called check layers set.atn. You want to select that. Does everybody have this found? And then just hit open. I'm not going to open mine because I've got 3,000 of them in here already. And when you do that, it's going to put in another action set called check layers. Does everybody have this? Did anybody not get this? Okay, has everybody got this? All right. So guys, this is how you do balancing in your composite. So here we go. So you need to make sure that you've got your top layer selected. So again, the composite version selected. What we're going to do is we're going to run these things, and this is going to allow us to compare our image, our figure, and our background, and make adjustments to that based on the information that we get from the check layers. So to run this, you need to make sure that you are selecting the parent called check layers. You don't want to start this in the middle. You want to start this at the very top. Simply click on it. It doesn't need to be open. It can be closed like this, but select the one at the very top. And then it's the arrow that's on the bottom of the palette that points to the right. You need to click on that and it will do some weird shit to your image that makes it look something like this. So does everybody have a weird image now? No. Did you run the action? Well, yeah, you got the really weird shit going on too. Yeah. Let's go down and see. Yeah, that's fine.
This is a banger.
This is what? Let's look again. Click on this and we're going to delete that. Okay, edit. Let's love this again. So go to the, we want to go, and we're going to come down to load. Click on that. So open. And then where is it going? It's at the bottom. Click on that. No, click on the check layers. Yeah, that one. Okay, now your image may look slightly different than mine. Don't worry, if yours looks different than mine, you've actually got a better action set than I've got. I've got like 15 of these right now. I'm going to make mine look like yours. So it looks like this? Yes. Oh yeah, hit cancel out of this. No, you don't need to go through that part. That's actually wrong. You need to select the top. That and then try to rotate. Yeah, okay, then hit cancel. And then we're gonna get rid of that place that's right at the very top. Go to the whole this right here, click on that and then throw it away. Right, yeah, yeah. So scroll down and find out where it is. So that's it right now. You need to select the one underneath it. Okay. Oh yeah, don't worry about this yet. Okay, so this is not where we start. This is just the way the action runs. It picks the last thing that we ultimately do for this. So if you take a look over onto your layers palette, I'm going to pull mine out so you can really see what's going on here. You don't need to pull yours out. I just want to make sure everybody understands this. So what we have here in this check layer set, at the very top, there's two layers that are together. These are adjustment layers that are together that are inside this group called color check. If you collapse this, you'll see it basically, this is your color check. Underneath it is a saturation check, and underneath that is a luminosity check. So you can leave this open, it doesn't matter. Sometimes it's a little confusing when people see this, so I would say go ahead and collapse it. But if we turn the eyeball off, then you see this is just our normal image. So what we're going to start with first is our luminosity check. So turn off the color part at the very top. Your image should look as normal as it started before we ran this thing. And then come down and click on the eyeball for the luminosity check. And you will see that your image turns black and white. So this is where we begin in doing all this work. I'm going to reset my workspace so that it looks like it always does. Okay, with the luminosity check on here, what you're doing here is you want to now control this in such a way that you feel like this is a legitimate black and white photograph. And you can see by looking at this right now, that girl is way too damn dark. There's just no way of getting around this. That is a contrast move to begin with. It might also be an exposure move on this as well. I don't know, but we're going to go after contrast first. So what happens with most people when they do contrast, I'm going to ask you to turn your luminosity check off for just a second. I'm going to say click on the figure. So I'm going to say we're going to actually put a curve on here to show you the wrong way to deal with contrast. So I've got all of my check layers are turned off. I've selected my composite body, and I'm just going to add a regular curve on top of this. So go to the bottom of your layers palette, the circle that's half black and half white. Click on that and come up and say curve. And we're just going to put a curve on here. Up in your properties panel, you've got a curve. And the typical way you would add contrast is to create an S curve. So what that means is if you click in the area kind of down in the shadow area of your curves and you click and you pull down, you're making your shadows darker. Then if you come up into the highlight area here, not all the way up to the whites, but up in the highlight area up in here, look at my screen, and click and push up, you're making the lighter areas of this lighter. So this S curve, that's why they call it an S curve, it looks kind of like an S. It's making my highlights lighter and my shadows darker. That is an increase in contrast. That's not what I want to do. I want to do the exact opposite. So to do the exact opposite, you would say, well, okay, just do the reverse of that curve. So I'm going to go back to my default so you can tear these little points off. And instead of making my shadows darker, I'm going to start with my shadows again. Instead of pulling them down, you push them up. It makes things lighter. And then for your highlights, instead of pushing up, you pull them down. It's the exact opposite. And you end up with this. Is that the skin tone that you want? Looks horrible, right? Do not try to control contrast using curves. It never works. Don't do it. Throw that curve away. There is a better way of doing this. Now, this composite body is a smart object, which is great because we can use smart filters on it, which are non-destructive. That will allow us to go in and change things. A year from now, you can go in, your smart filters are all intact, all with the numbers on them, all the whole 9 yards. Unfortunately, the thing I'm going to show you right now is a filter. It should be in the filter group, but it isn't. Again, Adobe at its very best when it comes to a user interface. So with the composite body selected, you want to come up to the image menu, down to adjustments, down to shadows and highlights. So again, image, adjustments, shadows and highlights, and let go. This is a filter. You will see once we say okay to this, it's going to show up right underneath here as a filter. What it does by default when it actually opens up, if you don't see this show more options, I'm going to uncheck mine. This is all you'll see here. You want to check on the show more options part. You want to open that whole part up. So what typically happens when you turn this thing on, when you open it up, whatever, is that it will, it opens up and you've got, it's only opening up the shadow parts of it all. That's all it's actually doing. So when I'm looking at this guy right now, you can see that by default, it's opening up my shadows by 35%. It's leaving my highlights and all of the color alone. However, I don't want to be doing this work without my luminosity check layer turned on, because this is where I can really see what it's doing. So I'm going to cancel out of this. I'm going to turn on the eyeball for my luminosity check layer, which gives me a black and white image. I'm going to then come back down and select the body, and then again up to the image menu, down to adjustments, down to shadows and highlights. And you can see the image opens up, but now when I look at this, she looks too flat. We've opened up now. I'm ignoring parts, the parts that are right underneath her boobs. This part that's right in here is in a much deeper shadow. I'm going to fix that doing something else. What I'm really looking for is her face right now. And her face does not, it looks just too light in this whole scene to me. It's too opened up. So her legs look the same way. So I'm going to grab the shadow percentage slider up at the very top, and I'm going to start to work my way towards the left to bring back in some tone until I get a feeling like, oh yeah, this is what this image would look like in black and white. And for me, I'm getting it somewhere around 19 or 20% in there. That's where I really see this feeling like that this is a normal black and white image. Again, if you crank the shadows way up, that is clearly not right. If you drag them all the way down, this is the problem that we had to begin with. So around that, I don't know, 17, 18, 19%, it feels correct to me. Do you guys agree? It kind of looks like the way a black and white photo would, right? So that's, I'm going to say okay to this. Now the next problem that I've got is that I feel good about I feel good about all the stuff that's in light. Like her sleeves I like, her legs I like, her face and hair I like, all that. But this area that's underneath her here, that's just way too dark. There would never be that kind of shadow. That has actually got to match the surrounding area. So I need to add a curve to actually do this because I need to paint this part in. So I'm going to come on top of it. So again, I've still got my body is selected. You'll notice that that shadows and highlights actually is a smart filter in spite of the fact that it wasn't in the filter menu. But I'm going to add a curve on here to actually open up the shadow part of that of the rest of her body. So to do that, you need to be really specific about this. So this again, this will be in the video, but we'll be doing this over and over and over again. But this is the way you go about doing this. You're going to add a curve to this. So I'm going to come in at the very bottom of my curves, my layers palette, the little circle that's half black and half white. I'm going to click on this and I'm going to say add a curve. But immediately you need to clip this curve to the body. Because right now, if I do lightening or darkening, it lightens and darkens my whole image. I don't want that. So instead, if you hover between the curve that we just added and the body, and you hold down your Option key, you'll get that little box with the arrow that points down. Click on that. It has now been clipped. You can tell because it's got that little arrow that's pointing right down at it. And now when you do this up and down, whatever, it only impacts the image of the figure. It doesn't impact anybody else. However, that's not the final move in this. The final move in this is that when you do changes in curves, it doesn't just impact the exposure. It also impacts saturation and color, saturation specifically. So we need to change the blending mode of this from normal down to luminosity so that now the only thing that we will change is actually the luminosity of this, the tone of this. We're not going to change saturation. We're not going to change color. And then I'm simply going to lift the shadows. So I'm going to come up to my properties panel. I'm going to click on the black point that's at the very bottom, and I'm simply going to drag it up. And you can overdo this. Don't worry about it because I can always go back and adjust it. So I'm just going to click and drag mine up. If you want the same value I've got an output at 68, a 0 to 68. It makes things really super flat. So then I'm going to invert this layer mask. So I've picked a layer mask because I want to hide it. I'm going to hit Command I to hide it. I am going to go back to my tablet. I'll give you guys a second if you want. I'm going to hit the B key to get a brush. In my case, it's giving me the mixer brush. I can tell by looking at the options up at the very top. I don't want the mixer brush. I want just a regular brush. So the regular brush tool. I'm going to check. I want this to be a completely soft brush because I want this tone work to blend in. I'm going to leave the opacity at 100%, but I'm going to bring my flow down to like 2%. And then I'm going to zoom in on this area. Out just a little bit like that. And on my tablet, I'm just going to start scrubbing in the area where these shadows are too dark. And keep moving. Don't stop. Every now and then, take your stylus off the tablet because if you like what you're seeing, and I like what I'm seeing right now, because that way, if you overshoot something and you need to do Command Z, you don't have to start from the very beginning. And then I'm just going to continue to work on this. And again, I'm trying to lift all of those areas that I feel like shouldn't be as dark as they are. I'm not going to worry too much about her arms and this or that part, but I am going to go after the rest of this. I'm going to hit that a little harder. Her crotch needs to be lifted a little bit as well. It's a very odd thing to say. Yeah, and if you overshoot something, like I feel like I went too far on the bottom hem of this jacket, just hit your X key. That will give you black, and you can actually then scrub back over it so that you're just going in the opposite direction. You're hiding a little bit of the stuff that we were trying to lift here. So I'm going to zip back out again right now, and I'm going to take a look at this. Now, also at this stage of the game, well, I'm going to see what it looks like. I'm going to turn my luminosity check layer off, and this is where I'm at right now. Now, I still think I've got other mismatches that are happening in here, but at least at this stage of the game, I believe this more than I did when I originally started my image. So I'm going to do another save right now. So come up to your file menu and come down and do a save. And now you actually got two states. If you come up to the very top, you'll see you've got all of your save states that are existing here. You can go back and see what this image looked like the last time I saved it. So I'm going to go back one step, and you can see what a major difference this is, and in terms of how much we've lifted this. So if you're using those history states, remember, if you don't go back and select the very bottom of your history set, you're going to lose all of that, which you do not want to do. So this is the first move that I'm going to make here. Now, I don't think this is perfect yet, but we're going to see what else we need to actually do on this image. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do my color check. So go to the very top and click on color check. You need to make sure that if you open this thing up, that both of the eyeballs are on. So you need to make sure, I'm opening up the group, that the hue saturation is on and the color check layer is on. What the hue saturation does, if you turn it off, the one at the very top, this is the true color of your image. And you can see it's very subtle. So I use the hue saturation to amp this whole thing up. And what I'm looking for now is to get these two to be much closer together in matching. Look at the figure. It is all blue. Look at the background. It is all yellow. Those are complementary colors of each other. The color in this is way off. Justin, do you have a question? Are you okay? Yeah, okay. So to fix this, we are going to add another adjustment layer. So come down to the curve that we used to open up her jacket. We're going to click on that because what I'm going to do is I'm stacking all of these adjustment layers on top of one another so that they are all clipped to only function on the figure and nothing else. So I'm selecting, this is the layer that we used to open up that jacket. I'm selecting that, and now I'm going to add, again, I'm going to add another adjustment layer. So click on the circle at the bottom, come up, and we are going to add color balance. So when the color balance comes on, the first thing that you do is clip it down to the layer that's right underneath it so that it only impacts the figure. So again, to see what I'm talking about, before you do that clipping, you can actually grab the cyan slider up at the very top and you can go back and forth and you see it impacts your entire image. I don't want that. I only want to change my figure. So I'm going to hover between the color balance adjustment layer and the curve that's right underneath it, hold down my option key, get that little weird square with the arrow, click. It now is clipped, so now when I actually do my adjustments here, it only impacts the figure. But that's not enough. You need to change the blending mode of this as well, because when you change color, you can change tone and saturation. I don't want to do that. So I'm going to, with this color balance layer selected, up to the blending modes, click on this, and you're going to come all the way down to color, because that's all you want this thing to do. And then look at your image. Right now, this is being dominated by blue. So you have 3 controls that are right here. You've also got a drop down that says midtones, shadows, and highlights. 99% of the time, guys, I leave this at the midtones. I don't need to make any other adjustment. But what I am going to do is I'm going to come down here, and you want to make sure that preserve luminosity is checked. It is by default. Just don't uncheck it. I'm going to take this and I'm going to drag this slider instead. I feel like this is too blue, so I'm going to drag this slider that says blue, and I'm going to drag it in the opposite direction until it starts to get over more towards the yellows and greens that are in my image. Now, at a certain point, you will hit a limit. So like right now, I'm at a -27. If I continue to push this to the left, it does next to nothing. But you don't want to do that. You want to do the minimum amount to actually get to the point that it should be. And so for mine, it's somewhere right around 30, a -30. That will actually get me there. Now I feel like this part is pretty good because it's matching a lot of the stone and the moss and the grass that's actually on here. There's a lot more orange that's in here as well. Yes.
I'm just gonna ask how you got to that feeling because mine keeps just going to like the gray.
You still got your luminosity check layer on, turn it off. Good, and then come all the way up to the top and click on that, and then open this up, because you need to turn on the hue saturation layer there. So now you've got this really, and you're actually really close. So then come back down to your image. So it's this layer that you're working on, not, it's that one right there. So this is now correct. Now move that slider back and forth, and we'll see what you do. Got it? So I'm feeling pretty good about this. Again, you could try and play a little bit with the red slider up at the very top. Or clearly I don't want to head towards green. I want to be heading more towards orange. Her face is already matching this orange back here pretty good. So I'm going to leave this and just see what it looks like. So to do this, I'm going to go up to the very top of my image, and I'm going to turn off my color check layer. And this is now where my image is at. And you can see I am really starting to get this to be blending in more about what this image should really look like. This is a huge adjustment that I've made between the contrast move and all of this. Now, when I look at this, I think this looks still a little bit yellow, but I'm not done yet. I've got one last check layer to do. And what you'll find that happens is that once you do all 3 of them, sometimes you only need to do 1, sometimes you need to do all 3, but a lot of times this is an iterative experience. When you change one thing, it changes everything. So there's a good chance I'm gonna have to come back and revisit the color a little bit, but I'm getting closer all the time. But my next move is gonna be my saturation check layer. It's the last one. So come down and click on turn on, hang on one second. Let me make sure I've turned my color off. Yeah, my color's off. Turn on your saturation check layer eyeball. And what you'll see is that your image actually turns black and white again, but it almost is an inverted thing. What's happening here is anything that is dark is not saturated. Anything that is light is very saturated. So when we're looking at this, you can actually see the leaves in the background that are, that really hyper yellow fall, autumn leaves, whatever. They're very light here. That indicates that they're very saturated. But if you take a look at her jacket, for instance, her jacket is a neutral gray. There is no saturation in that at all, and that's why it's dark. What I look at when I see this is that I feel like her face is slightly too saturated to fit this scene. Again, it doesn't seem to me to be sort of in that mid-range here. So I'm going to drop the saturation on her face slightly, and we'll see what happens. So to do that, it's the last of your adjustment layers. So make sure that you have got your color balance layer is selected. We are going to add another adjustment layer on top of it. So click on this, and we are going to add hue and saturation. And again, the second you bring this on, you need to clip it so that it only controls the hue and saturation of the girl. So hover between the two, hold down your option key and clip it. And then you also need to change the blending mode of this from normal to saturation. So all of these things get changed to be what you're trying to control them. So our first curve was to control the shadows. That's luminosity. Our second was color overall. And our third one now is saturation. And so you use those respective blending modes so that the only thing you're changing is the thing you anticipate to change. So then I'm simply going to come up to my saturation slider and I'm going to start to pull it back. And you can see it makes her face slightly darker, but this seems to fit more in this image to me. It's not an outlier. It just seems to feel a little bit better to me. So that's where, if you want the same number I had a -10 for the saturation. So then I'm going to turn off my saturation check layer. Then I come back to this image and I still feel like now looking at this that it's slightly too yellow. So I'm going to go back to my color balance check layer, color balance adjustment layer, and I'm going to back the yellow slightly off. So I'm down closer around to like -23. That feels a little bit better to me. And then I'm going to save this image. And then if we go back to the very top of our history palette and we go back 2 steps, this is what it looked like when we first built our comp, and this is where we're at now. And I can tell you, you print this thing out and go out and show it to somebody at the front desk and say, you know, I just got back this weekend from shooting up in Devil's Lake and I did these pictures and what do you think? And they will not pick up on this as a composite at all. Would you? You would? How?
I see the green glow.
Oh, yeah, she may still have spill. Yeah, if she still got spill, then that would be a problem.
But besides that,
Yeah, where's the green glow? Around her legs. So it's interesting. You can actually choke this stuff after the fact. So we might as well do that part really quickly as long as we're here. And then we're going to go to something completely different. But just so, because it does have. So you could open up the smart object and do it here, because this is really where it is. And it's really hard to see it in here. Again, I would actually end up choking it here, but you can choke it. I said you can choke it after the fact, so I'll show you how to do that. So I'm going to load this as a selection. So just click on the smart object, command click, it loads it as a selection. We're going to add this as a layer mask. So now I've got a layer mask on here. And then again, the same way we choke anything, I'm going to come over to my history palette. I'm going to do a snapshot and call this pre-choke. And then I'm going to go down to my history palette and actually I'm going to leave that layer mask on there. So pre-choke and then back down, and then I'm going to blur this. So up to the filter menu, down to blur, down to Gaussian blur, and it makes it a little bit worse. I'm going to say 4 is probably okay on this. I'll say okay to that. And then Command L to bring up levels dialog box, and I'm going to choke this down. Again, it got really soft, so I'm going to pull the white back as well to sharpen it up. Choke it a little bit more. So that feels better. If you do your preview on and off, you can see it's actually gotten rid of that part. Although I'm looking at a green background, it would help if I looked at something else like this line right here. And go ahead and say okay to that. And snapshot this and call it post choke. And then I'm going to go back before I did the choke in history. So all the way back to add layer mask. And then I'm going to put my little history brush next to the post choke. And then I'm going to grab my history brush, make it bigger. Still working on that layer mask. And then again, you can see as I run down through here, it'll get rid of the green. It's still got spill in it as well. I would go in and fix all that part. I would probably go back to my original image, the original smart object, and fix it all there, but you get the idea, right? Questions about this? We've come a long way. All righty. So we've got one last thing to do. You don't need to save this. You can close this up. But think about what we've gotten through today. I mean, this is massive, right? We got through perspective. We've done our first comps. We got through check layers. We realized how to balance exposure, how to balance color, how to then correct for the two and put the two together, how to scale things right, how to do exposures correct for those things to match. I mean, this is a massive amount. I realize that. I'm sympathizing with you. A massive amount to take on, but we spend the rest of the semester doing exactly this. Okay, so the last thing I'm going to show you really quickly is stuff that I do quite a bit, and it's to build your own backgrounds. I've pretty much pulled this assignment out, I think, but let's take a quick look at your assignment folder here. So the assignment folder here is, you're going to shoot a real backdrop, and then you are going to actually, there's two files in here, this composite body 1, which looks like that, and composite body 2, which looks like this. It's the one you've been working with. Anyway, but the assignment says, so yeah, you're going to shoot a real background and you're going to composite using the background in either Comp 1 or Comp 2. I want you to add shadows and I want you to use check layers to balance the luminance, color, and saturation. So that's the assignment. You don't have to shoot a real background. You can use something that you've already shot. You can actually use found imagery. One of the things that we didn't talk about matching in here, though, that we need to if you're going to do found imagery is resolution. So resolution of these things has to match as well. If you have a really high res body and you put it on a really low res background, you will notice the difference from a mile away. So resolution needs to be actually added to that list. So I'm adding mine right now. So if you're going to do found imagery, just make sure it's a high-res image, because both of these files that I'm giving you are high-res. The thing is that it's possible to go in on one of these bodies and step on the resolution so that it matches whatever you've got going. That's another option here, but I don't wide degrade your images if you don't have to. Okay, so that's what's going on here. So the next thing I'm going to show you used to be an assignment, but I've been really kind to you guys and actually tried to cut down on the amount of homework that you have. But I do want to show you, and I want you to go through the steps with me about how we actually do this part, and then we'll jump out. So it is a build background exercise. That's the last one I'm going to actually ask you to open up and look. So in your student week number 9, there's a folder called Build Background Exercise. And I want to start with, there are 2 Photoshop files called backgroundwall.psd, and then there's background wall 1 psd, and then background wall 2. I want you to open both of those into Photoshop. And if you open them up and take a look at them, so this was a whole project that I did, and I was really interested in. And I know you guys have seen these, buildings as they, especially when they start to demo buildings and you can see the inside of like the apartments and all that kind of stuff, whatever. And a lot of times if they're old enough, you'll see like really peeling paint or wallpaper that's like coming, I mean, that was the kind of vibe that I was going for. And of course, the thing is that when you're looking for something, you can never find it, right? So anyway, I decided I was going to make my own. So the picture of the peeling paint that's on this side over here was actually about the size of a paperback book. It was the support structure where the Metro crosses Addison. So, and I just took a picture of it with my camera. And then the other thing that's next to it was, because again, I wanted this wallpaper sort of like older peely thing vibe going onto it. So I simply went to a wallpaper store and they gave me free samples of wallpaper. So this sample of wallpaper is about the size of a piece of paper, about 8.5 by 11. So, and I simply scanned it. That's all that I'm looking at here. So I wanted to put these together to sort of create this space that I had in my mind. So this is, you're going to do this one with me, I hope. So if you take a look at the peeling paint one by itself, you'll notice that there is a curve on here. I'm going to go ahead and turn that curve on. It's actually just increasing the contrast. But then I'm going to select the curve because I'm going to bring the wallpaper in, and I want to combine the wallpaper with this. but I want it above the contrast curve because I don't want to add contrast to the wallpaper. So I've just turned on the eyeball, I've selected the curve, then I'm going to come back to the wallpaper one, and I'm going to grab the layer that is the wallpaper, layer number 2, and I'm simply going to drag it on top of the other image. Hold down the shift key so that it is centered and let go. And you can see it comes in and it begins to cover it, which is fine. I'm going to then close up the original wall, where I just pulled that from, so that I've only got a single image to work with, and then I'm going to save my work. So in this case, it doesn't cover the entire thing completely, so I'm going to turn this into a smart object, my wallpaper, because I'm going to transform it, but I don't want to do it destructively. Up to the layer menu, down to smart objects, convert to smart object, and then Command T to transform. And again, I can just click on the link between the width and the height, and then using the scrubby slider over either the H for height or the W for width, I'm just going to click and drag until it covers the entire image. And so now I don't need to worry about where it is, where it isn't, all of that kind of stuff. I'm going to go ahead and hit the check mark on this, and you'll see now the image itself. So I'm going to select this. I'm going to hit the V key. I'm going to move this around to see if I like interesting parts of it better. You'll see when I did the scan, I actually had it on green screen so that I could separate it. Not that I really needed to. But I'm going to go around and look around and see if there's more interesting parts. Like I kind of like the flowers and the red part that's up in here a little bit better. So I'm just relocating this to make this look like the way I think it should look. So then I want to put these two together. And the general rule of thumb is to, when you try to put things together, your first move is to look at blending modes. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to click on the drop down of the menu of this, and I'm going to come down to multiply to begin with. And multiply actually does put them together. It lets the relief of the part come through, but the problem that I have with this is that it looks like, it doesn't look like that the paint is peeling off the wallpaper that's underneath. I want the wallpaper to be under the paint, and right now it's not. So right now it's on top of it. So multiply is not going to work for me. You can try its counterpart, screen. It just makes everything a little too blown out. I kind of like this, but this isn't really the vibe that I'm actually going for here either. So I'm going to then try overlay. Overlay will actually put that together, but you'll see if you zoom in on this, the problem I've got is there's still a lot of wallpaper that is on the outside of the paint, and I don't really want that part. So I'm going to go to soft light is just a softer version of that. That's not really helping me out here at all. You can look at the hard lights or the vivid lights. Nothing in here is really giving me what I want, because what I want to have happen here, I'm going to go back to normal. What I want to have happen here is I want the paint on top. So I could, and I've never tried this, but we're going to try this right now. I'm going to double click on the word that says background, because right now it's locked. If you double click on it, it'll actually offer to name this layer 0. This happens every single time you do this. Say OK, and that lock will go away. And then I can drag my wallpaper underneath this. And with it underneath this, I can then change the blending mode of my top layer right here to see if this helps. So I'm going to try this. I'm also going to clip this contrast curve to this layer 0, because right now it's impacting the wallpaper as well. So I'm just going to clip that down, and then I'm going to change the blending mode of this, and we'll try again. I'm going to back out just a little bit so I can see what's really going on. So I'm going to go back to multiply again, not helping me, looks pretty much the same. Screen again, looks exactly the same. Overlay, even worse. So soft light, even worse. It's all showing up on top of this. So that is clearly not a move that I want to do. So I'm going to drag the wallpaper back on top. And now what I realize is that I need to mask this. I need to use a luminosity mask that's actually going to show the areas that are not peeling paint, and then protect the areas that are. So if you turn off the eyeball for the wallpaper one and you look at this, I can actually load this as a layer mask. So I can load the luminosity. So if you come over to your layer number 0 now, hold down your command key and click, you load the luminosity of this. And I'm not seeing any, yeah, I am seeing, I've got little marching ants going around the top. I'm going to save this as a selection. So I'm going to come up to the select menu, down to save selection, and I'm just going to call it paint luminosity. And say OK to that. Command D to deselect. And then I'm going to go look at that. So if you come down to the paint luminosity, it looks like it looks like the whole thing is selected, and it looks like it's also changed my layer order. So hang on, that didn't work. I'm going to go back in history before I actually made this background layer 0. That's where I was. So I'm going to do this again. I'm going to turn off the top one. I'm going to hover over this background layer, hold down my control key and click. I'm sorry, my command key. And this is still not giving me the luminosity selection of this. At this stage of the game, I'm going to save this. I'm going to quit Photoshop. I'm going to start Photoshop. I'm going to go up to my File menu, open Recent, and open the wall. Hover over the background, hold down my command key, and click, and I still do not get a selection. All right, well, I'm going to go if this another way. I'm going to hover over the RGB channel and try it there. I'm going to click there, and now I get a selection going. That's weird. Anyway, so I'm hovering over the RGB channel, holding down the command key and clicking. I've now got a selection going, and I'm going to save this up to the select menu, down to save selection, and call this paint Lumo. And say OK, Command D to deselect, and then go look at it. So if you come down, Command D to deselect, if you come down and you actually take a look at it, you can see it's got elements of it that would work for a mask. But if I use this for a mask to hide my wallpaper, wherever my mask is white is going to show the wallpaper. I want the exact opposite, correct? So how do I get the exact opposite? Say what? Exactly, I just invert it. Now the areas that were white are darker, and they will actually hide the wallpaper. The areas that are lighter will actually let it come through. So I can continue to work on this though. I don't know that this is exactly the way I want it, but I'll find out. I'm going to command click to load this as a selection. I'm going to come up to my wallpaper, turn it on, and I'm going to simply add this as a layer mask. And you can see it's starting to begin to do the things that I wanted it to do. However, I think there's areas about this that I can actually make stronger or more apparent about what's really going on. So to do that, if you look at your mask by itself, so I'm just going to hold down the Option key and click on this. I am going to go back to my tablet. I'm going to then, if I wanted to, then just simply come in here and paint to make things darker. Like this is paint area right in here. I could hit the B key to get a brush. Black is my foreground color. I'm going to go ahead and crank my opacity all the way up and my flow all the way up. I'm going to set my brush as a medium hardness. And then I could come in here and I could just paint on this. But the problem is this does not respect any of the luminosity that I have. So it's just going to end up being this big blob that I do in the middle to actually hide that part. I don't want to do that. Instead, I want this to respect the luminosity of this. So I'm going to go back before I actually did that brush stroke. Hold down my Option key and click on this. If you change your brush to overlay, then you can come in here in areas like this. It will respect those edges. Now in this case, I don't think it did a very good job about respecting those edges. So I'm going to hit Command Z to undo that. I'm going to use the Dodge and Burn tool to do the same thing. So you can do the Burn tool, which is another tool sort of in the middle of your layer stack here. I'm going to come over to this part, and in the terms of what you are burning, you can actually do shadows, midtones, or highlights. I'm going to leave this in the shadow area to try to protect these highlights. And then I'm going to simply come in here and do this. And you can see by burning this down, I'm actually keeping all the luminosity characteristic of the image, of what's underneath it, but making it darker. So when I look at the image, this area doesn't have any of the wallpaper coming through. However, this area, which should be wallpaper, doesn't. So I'm going to hit the X key to get white. And I'm sorry, not the X key. I'm going to go change this to the Dodge tool. And again, if you take a look at the image by itself, or the mask by itself, I can actually come in here and dodge this back. And now if we watch this happen in real time, you'll see that I'm actually bringing the wallpaper back, but I'm doing it and preserving the luminosity of this all. I can also run levels on this. I don't need to simply keep this the way it is. I'm going to double click on the hand. I can make this more contrasty to really show those parts better. So with my mask selected, Command L to bring up the levels dialog box. I can make things darker, that's the paint. I can make the background lighter, that's what's coming through. And then take a look at this now. So this is now my background, and I feel like this was actually giving me sort of the vibe that I was really looking for on this. Is this making sense? Is anybody keeping up with me on this one or trying to? Okay. So I'm going to leave it at this. Again, I would continue to work on this to bring it out a little bit more, but it's got kind of the vibe that I'm looking for here. I would certainly pull in a little bit more down in here, all of that kind of stuff. But I'm going to add a figure to this really quickly. So to do that, if you go into that same build background exercise, there is a puppet warp figure.psd. If you can bring that into Photoshop and hide others. If we then take a look at the figure by itself, I'm going to turn off the background. You've got just the figure by itself. It's inside a group right now. There's a lot of stuff going on in this group to make this figure. I don't want to keep all of this stuff in here like this, so I'm going to make a smart object of the entire group. You can do that. So I've selected figure. I'm simply going to come up to the layer menu, down to smart objects, and convert to smart object. And then I can actually drag this entire figure, which is on a transparent background, on top of my fake background, hold down the Shift key and let go and bring it in place. And then get rid of the figure that came in, that brought it in. So now I've got an image that I'm beginning to work on here, and it's like, okay, well, this is beginning to work for me a little bit. You know, I kind of like, this is the vibe that I was actually going for here. But the problem is that she's just floating in space. This is a girl on a wall. This isn't a girl in a room. Make sense? So I'm going to add the floor. To do that, the last file that you bring in is this concrete glossy cement. I pulled this off the internet. I'm going to bring this into Photoshop as well. I get a color mismatch warning. That's fine. And I'm going to say hide others. So then I need to figure out where my floor actually goes. So if I turn on my image again, what I've got is I've got this background wall and I've got this figure. I'm also going to combine my background wall into a smart object. So I'm going to select it because I want to be able to control the wall is one unit. I don't want, if I want to blur the wall, I want everything blurred. I don't want to, if I want to sharpen the wall, I want all of it sharpened. I can't do that if it's on separate layers, and I can't do it if it's in groups. So I'm going to select the top layer, hold down my Shift key and select the bottom layer and convert this into a smart object. And now I can do all the, so I've got now the girl and the wall, and that's basically it. So with the floor is like shadows. It needs to go on top of the wall, but underneath the girl. So I'm going to select my layer number 1, which is the background wall. I'm going to grab the concrete, I'm going to drag it over and hold down the shift key and let go. And I get a mismatch warning. I'm okay with that. And then I'm going to get rid of the file that I brought in. So now I've got a girl that is not against a floor, doesn't have a floor, whatever. There's just two walls in here. There's a concrete wall, and then there's the wall that I've been working with. So I need to turn this into a floor. How do I do that? Any suggestions? Perspective. I don't know about the perspective tool, but I am going to use perspective to do this. First off, I'm going to make this a smart object as well. Layer, smart objects, convert to smart object. Now at this stage of the game, you have to go to the pasteboard because I'm going to do such a radical transformation on this. My handles, I'll clearly run out of room for my handle. So F key to get to the pasteboard, and then I am going to use perspective to actually change this. So to do that, you come up to the edit menu, down to transform, down to perspective. So the first thing that I need to do with perspective, if you take a look at what perspective does, I'm going to grab this top corner, right corner right here. I'm going to drag it to the right. It actually does both of them. It'll take the left one to the other side as well. And you can see if you go far enough like this, it begins to look like a ceiling. It's not looking like a floor anymore, or a background wall. It's looking like a ceiling. I'm just bringing this far enough to wide enough here so that I can fill my image. Where I'm really going to turn this into the floor is this other one at the bottom. So I'm going to grab the other one at the bottom and really start to drag this. And you can see this is starting to change its perspective to become more of a floor. Now I need to do it even more. So I've got to zoom back out so that I can still get to my control handles and continue this process. So you can see how far of a transform out this thing is. It's crazy. And I'm going to go ahead and say okay to that, and then zoom into my image. And this is it feels like a good floor to me, but clearly it's not in the right spot. So with the floor selected, I'm going to hit the V key to get the move tool, and I'm simply going to bring it down so that she's actually standing on it. Now, if I want her far away from the wall, we'll actually keep this the floor very high on the background wall. If I want her closer to the wall, I simply bring it down like this so that it's not, so it's giving me this sort of like shorter distance from the figure to the wall. The last thing that I've got in here, again, I don't have any shadows in here. That would actually help me immensely, but what else do I not have in this composite that I need? Say what? Shadows, I said. That part I admitted. But something else. What is missing in this? It's the last thing that you should go in next to, right after we added resolution onto your things that need to match on here. How about depth of field? Right? I don't have depth of field in this. The background wall is tack sharp. The floor is tack sharp. So I need to create the illusion of depth of field. So this is how I'm going to do it. I'm going to turn off the figure temporarily. I take that back. I'm going to leave the figure on right now. I'm going to come back down to my wall, the wall that's in the back, and I'm simply going to blur it. So I'm going to come up to the filter menu, down to blur. Again, it's a smart object, so I'll be able to control this later if I need to adjust it. And I'm going to blur it, and a 4 is way too much blur. So I'm going to see what a 1 does, and I'm going to turn my screen on and off. And a 1 feels about right to me. I mean, again, she's relatively close to the wall. It's going to be a little bit softer, but it's not going to completely lose all of its characteristics. So I think that part is actually going to work for me here. And I'm going to go ahead and say okay to that. Again, it's a smart filter. I can go back in and adjust this. If I feel like it needs more, I can add more. If I feel like it's less, I can add less. But now comes the tricky part. I need to do the same thing to the floor. But on the floor, my problem with the floor is that the front of the girl should be soft. The area right under the girl should be should be sharp. And then the area as it goes back to the wall gets soft again. Depth of field, right? So the front of an image, soft. where your subject is sharp, the back of the image soft as well. I need to do that part. Does that make sense to everyone? Is anyone still alive in this one? Okay, it's the last thing I'm going to give you guys, but you need this shit for your compositing. So anyway, we're just going to have at it. I'm going to blur the hell out of this thing to begin with. So, and I've got this line on my image right here that I don't want. So I'm going to get rid. It keeps coming on. Because I unchecked my show transfer controls on all of this, and I still get this shit. Adobe is quickly driving me into some other retouching software because I'm really angry with all the shit that they keep fucking up. At any rate, to do this, I'm going to blur the hell out of this to begin with. Again, it's a smart object, so but it'll show you what I'm trying to do. So I'm going to do blur, Gaussian blur, and I'm really going to hit this hard. I'm going to smack the hell out of it. So like a 10. And you can see. So it's really, really, really blurry. But the reason I'm doing this is that I've got a smart filter mask that I can now control. So I could come in and I could paint area along this mask to make the area underneath her feet sharp. So that's one way of doing it. So I'm going to hit the B key to get a brush. I'm going to make it a completely soft brush. I'm going to change the blending mode to normal. 100% opacity, 100% flow. It is black, which means on this mask it's going to hide that blur effect. So then I'm going to come to this one side over here. So I'm on the left side of my image with a brush. This is true of a lot of the tools in Photoshop. If you click once, you need to be on the smart filter mask. If you click once, it'll put down a mark on that mask. Actually, white is my foreground color. Let's try this one more time. With black as your foreground color, you click once and you'll see it actually put a mark. If you look at my layer mask, it put a mark right there. But then if you come to the other side and hold down your shift key and click a second time, it will paint a line straight across. So this is what my line now looks like. That was created by, again, clicking once on one side, holding down the shift key and clicking on the other side. So now I know I've got this part sharp, and then I can adjust my amount of blur underneath this. So I can come back and pull this back down so that I've got a sort of a softer front and a sort of softer back, but the area underneath her is actually tack. So it needs to be a little bit stronger than that. Yeah. So that's one way of doing it. The other way to do this, I'm going to fill this with white. White is my background color. Command delete will fill that with white. The other way is to use a gradient. So if you hit the G key to get your gradient, you'll still want to keep this as a classic gradient. However, in this case, I want to change this to go from, instead of foreground to transparent, I want to go from foreground to background. But then also in this, I do not want to do a radial gradient. I want to do a mirrored gradient. It's the fourth one over, or a reflected gradient. If you click on this one, then you can come down into your image. Again, I'm working on this mask right here. If you click and drag, you will see that it puts that same type of line down. If we take a look just at this line, that's what that line looks like. So gradients you can pull anywhere, and when you pull one, it will overwrite the other. So I can pull another one up here and it'll look like that. I can pull a large one down here, it'll look like that. So I'm going to turn this all back on and pull another one so that it actually looks like where it's supposed to be. And then I would, again, bump up my blur a little bit more. So now I've got depth of field. Questions about any of this? We good? I will see you guys next week.